Chapter 1120. Young Master Qingshan smiled coldly. If I wasn't here, you would have become someone's concubine. Yungu, who knew that she was in the wrong and had a natural fear of a certain someone, lowered her head and shrunk her neck in grievance. Su Qingshan looked at her pitiful appearance and his heart softened. He sighed softly. Don't run around in the future, okay? You should know how dangerous it was today. Yungu didn't care if she understood Su Qingshan's words and nodded repeatedly. Young Master Qingshan rubbed her hair and said, "You've just cured the poison. Rest for a while. I'll go take care of some things." Okay. Yungu nodded and blinked her big eyes at young Master Qingshan. Young Master Qingshan stood up and looked at Yungu. He said in a deep voice, "Don't run away again. Otherwise, I'll lock you up and you'll be copying books for the rest of your life." Sob. Yunji's little heart trembled. She nodded vigorously and then shook her head desperately. Seeing her like this, the coldness in young Master Qingshan's eyes dissipated a lot. "If you're obedient, I won't punish you." In fact, Miss Yungu was a very interesting person, young Master Qingshan thought silently. However, he couldn't bully her too harshly. Otherwise, the little girl would run away again. "Okay, I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." Yungu, who didn't dare to have any rebellious thoughts, shrunk under the blanket and covered her head, unwilling to face the reality in front of her. Young Master Qingshan smiled faintly and shook his head. He turned and walked out of the door. At the same time, his eyes, which were originally filled with faint warmth, were covered with a layer of frost again. As soon as he stepped out of the door, the Guangling Prefecture chief greeted him eagerly. "Young master." Su Qingshan raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He glanced at the crowd in the courtyard and turned to walk to the front hall. Two of the gray-clothed guards at the door were left behind to guard the door. The rest followed silently. The Guangling Prefecture chief hesitated for a moment and glared fiercely at old Master Huang's family before hurriedly following. In the parlor, young Master Qingshan sat at the head of the table and drank tea. The arrogant and despotic young Master Huang was tied up like a big dumpling and thrown in the hall. The people of the Huang family had already arrived. A middle-aged woman dressed in luxurious clothes wailed and rushed over. "Zuers! Zuer, what happened to you? Who bullied you?" Young Master Huang was unable to speak for a long time. It was obvious that his mute acupoint had been sealed. He could only try his best to signal the woman with his eyes. Unfortunately, the woman was too anxious and worried to understand what he meant. "I am Guangling Prefecture Chief Li Jie. Greetings to young master." The Guangling Prefecture chief tidied his attire and bowed respectfully. On the other side, old Master Huang was flustered and exasperated. "Lord Li, what exactly is going on? Who is this young master? What right does he have to treat my son like this?" The Guangling governor cursed in his heart for being an idiot. He lowered his eyes and lowered his head, as if he didn't hear old Master Huang's words. "Lord Li," young Master Qingshan put down the teacup in his hand and said indifferently. "Yes, young master, please give your orders." The Guangling governor hurriedly replied. Su Qingshan said, "You've already been in Guangling for more than 3 months. You've handled official matters quite well. But how do you explain these things?" A thick stack of papers was thrown into the Guangling Prefecture chief's arms. The Guangling Prefecture chief hurriedly caught it and flipped it open. The more he read, the paler his face became. It recorded all the crimes committed by the rich and powerful in Guangling who had bullied and humiliated the common people. Some of the cases had been reported to the Yamen but had been suppressed by him. The Guangling Prefecture chief also had his difficulties. Guangling had always been in the hands of the Dechu state. In the following years, it had been in the hands of Xiling. But no matter which side it was in, the local landowning households had remained stable. Guangling had once been the capital of the previous dynasty. The landowning households that had remained had a long history and were deeply rooted. He had been born into an ordinary family and had relied on his own abilities to reach the position of prefecture chief. But after arriving in Guangling, he was restrained by the landowning households. In order to smoothly take over Guangling and restore the people's livelihood, he had no choice but to compromise with the landowning households and turn a blind eye to many of their actions. I know my wrongs. Young master, please punish me. The Guangling prefecture chief knelt on the ground. He didn't explain himself and only asked for forgiveness in a low voice. Su Qingchen looked at him and said, I also understand why you did these things. There is a reason for everything. I won't punish you, but, since you are the prefecture chief, you are the parent official of the people. I hope that you will first think of the people and not weigh the pros and cons. If you have any difficulties, directly report to the higher-ups. Someone will naturally help you. Even if you act first and report later, the prince and the princess will not blame you. But, if your weighing of the pros and cons causes the people to suffer, not to mention the prince and the princess, even I will not forgive you. You will no longer be the prefecture chief. Actually, saying that the people suffered was too serious. Under Li Jie's rule, Guangming was rather good in all aspects. But the landowning households that had been entrenched in Guangling for a long time were not people that a mere prefecture chief like Li Jie could deal with. Hearing Su Qingchen's words, the Guangling prefecture chief secretly sighed in relief. He knelt respectfully and said, I understand. I have betrayed the trust of the prince and the princess. I will not dare to do so again. Su Qingchen nodded with satisfaction and said, very good. Then let's deal with these matters first. Hearing this, the Guangling prefecture chief couldn't help but take a deep breath. It recorded almost all the crimes of the landowning households in Guangling. If it was really dealt with according to the law, it was likely that all the landowning households in Guangling would be offended. But thinking about how the Prince of Glass City had treated the old officials of the previous dynasty, young Master Qingchen's attitude seemed reasonable. Whether it was the prince or the young master, both were very dissatisfied with these people. Today's matter was just an excuse to make a fuss. What? Seeing his hesitation, Su Qingchen calmly raised his eyebrows and asked. No. I will obey. The Guangling prefecture chief stood up and raised his voice. Men. Soon, the yamen runners waiting outside the door came in and respectfully received the order. The Guangling prefecture chief recited a long list of names in one breath. They were all the hedonistic sons of the landowning households in Guangling City with bad reputations. He said in a low voice, quickly arrest these people and bring them to justice. With such an order, even the yamen runners couldn't help but be stunned. Looking at the extraordinarily handsome young master sitting at the head of the table, they hurriedly accepted the order and left. Lordly, what is the meaning of this? Old Master Huang couldn't react to this sudden change and looked at the Guangling prefecture chief as he questioned. The Guangling prefecture chief laughed coldly and said, the others have not arrived yet. Why don't we deal with the matter at hand first? What do you think, young master? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, all right. Huang Yaozu, you used the power of the Huang family to kidnap a woman and force her to be a concubine, causing the death of a family of 3. Do you know your crime? What? Chapter 11:21. Hearing the Guangling prefecture chief's words, everyone in the Huang family was momentarily stunned. It was not only because the Huang family was so powerful in Guangling that no one dared to control them. Furthermore, the matter that the Guangling governor was talking about should have happened 2 to 3 years ago, and the Huang clan had already suppressed it. It was impossible for the Guangling governor, who had only been in office for 2 to 3 months, to even know about it, let alone investigate. However, what the Guangling governor said in the air was completely accurate, even down to how many people had died. Old Master Huang looked at the white-robed man in shock. He couldn't figure out who he was. Although young Master Qingchen did not reprimand him, the Guangling prefecture chief was already very ashamed. Seeing that old Master Huang was still glancing at Su Qingchen, he was even angrier. It wasn't that he didn't want to deal with these old nobles after taking office, but now that the world had just settled down, the most important thing was to stabilize the people. These landowning households had been entrenched in Guangling for many years. As long as they stirred up a little trouble, he would not be able to suppress them. At that time, it would be his mistake to cause a disturbance in Guangling, which had just settled down. But now that he had young Master Qingchen's support, he naturally didn't have any misgivings. He wanted to deal with this matter boldly and decisively so that he could return Guangling to a peaceful world. Huang Shiliang, I'm asking you a question. What are you looking at? The Guangling governor asked in a deep voice. Old Master Huang's heart skipped a beat. His intuition told him that the situation today was not good. However, even though he knew something was wrong, he couldn't just let it go. This was because young Master Huang, Huang Yaozu, was the only son of the Huang family. Lordly, I'm afraid there's some misunderstanding here. My son has always abided by the rules. How could he do such an evil thing? Someone must be framing my Huang clan. Please investigate this matter thoroughly. Governor Li was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at Huang Yaozu, who was trapped on the ground and couldn't move, and said, "Follow the rules." If he followed the rules, then how did he end up being tied up like this? Old Master Huang stole a glance at the white-robed young master who was calmly drinking tea and said in a low voice, "Who knows? Could it be that they deliberately set a trap to frame my son?" Su Qingchen, what are you doing? Just as Li Taisho was about to get angry, a clear and melodious voice came from the door. Everyone was stunned. They turned their heads and saw a delicate and beautiful girl in yellow standing at the door, looking at them with a strange expression. He saw that the young girl's cheeks were blushing, and there was a faint blush on her cheeks. It was obvious that she had just woken up. Most importantly, Old Master Huang's expression was stiff as he turned around to look at the white-robed young master sitting at the head of the table. His expression was twisted. Young Master Qingchen. Old Master Huang's vision darkened and he almost fell to the ground. How could he not know what his son was like? Just by looking at this rare beauty in front of him, Old Master Huang could guess what had happened. But who would have thought that his son would offend young Master Qingchen in Guangling? It was known that young Master Qingchen was a man of his word within the jurisdiction of the Prince Ding mansion. Even Prince Ding himself had to yield to him. Did the heavens really want to exterminate the Huang family? Su Qingchen looked at Yungu disapprovingly. She waved at her and said, "Didn't I tell you to rest well? Why did you come out again?" Yungu looked at the people in the hall curiously. She stepped into the hall and walked to Su Qingchen. "I can't sleep." Su Qingchen patted the chair beside her and said, "Since you can't sleep, just sit here for a while." Yungu nodded and sat down beside Su Qingchen indifferently. She blinked her eyes and looked at the person who was tied up like a dumpling and asked, "Su Qingchen, what are you doing?" Su Qingchen smiled and said, "Lord Li is investigating the case. I'm here to take a look." "You sit and take a look too." Yungu glared at the person on the ground and nodded heavily. "Yes, that guy is a bad guy. Lord Li must punish him severely." Su Qingchen lovingly rubbed the hair on her head and said with a smile, "Lord Li handles things fairly. He will definitely punish him severely." Below, Governor Li's mouth secretly twitched. Must Huang Yaozu be severely punished to be considered fair? Since young Master Qinchin had said so, what else could he say as a subordinate? Lord Li. Su Qinchin calmly glanced at Governor Li. Governor Li's heart trembled. He quickly put away the criticism in his heart and said with a serious face, Wang Shiliang, do you have anything else to say? Master Huang's legs went soft and he finally knelt on the ground. Few people in the world had not heard of young Master Qinchin's name. People with power like them naturally knew more than ordinary people. They also understood that the name young Master Qinchin represented not only the peerless talent and incomparable intelligence of the Su family, but also the power that was enough to intimidate thousands of people in the world. Young Master Qinchin, I know my mistake. Please spare my son's life. After knowing the identity of the person sitting there, Master Huang also knew that it was useless to deny. He could only beg bitterly to save his son's life. Seeing Governor Li's inquiring gaze, Su Qinchin calmly said, Lord Li is investigating the case. Why is Lord Li looking at me? In that case, he would be punished according to the law. Governor Li understood in his heart. His expression became serious and he said in a deep voice, since he has admitted his guilt. Guards, Huang Yaozu bullied the common people, kidnapped a woman, and caused her death. Take him to prison first and choose a day to behead him. This sentence had already cut off Huang Yaozu's path of survival. In the hall, not only did Master Huang's family's expression change, Huang Yaozu, who was tied to the ground, also struggled desperately. He desperately looked in Yun Ji's direction with begging eyes. Yungu frowned and turned to look at Su Qinchin. Su Qinchin said indifferently in a low voice, You are lucky that I saved you. Think about it, if other girls met him, would they be so lucky? Also, he killed a family of 3. Yungu widened her eyes and angrily glared at Huang Yaozu. She lightly snorted and turned her small face away. Bad guy. I don't want to save him. Seeing Yun Ji's performance, young Master Qinchin laughed and shook his head. Governor Li waved his hand and ordered people to quickly take Huang Yaozu away. Master Huang wailed and knelt on the ground, Young Master Qinchin, please spare my life. My son knows his mistake. Please spare his life. This lowly one only has this one son. I beg young master to leave a trace of the Huang family's bloodline. Yungu looked at Master Huang and frowned. She said crisply, You only have this one son in your family. There is no one left in the family that was killed by him. Master Huang was speechless. When his son forced a family of 3 to die, how could he have thought of today's retribution? Woo-woo. It's all this lowly one's teaching. It's fine. I beg young Master Qinchin to give me a way out. This lowly one is willing to give away all the family's wealth. I only beg young master to spare my son's life. Su Qinchin's eyes flashed. He said indifferently, Give away all the family's wealth. Are you serious? Master Huang was stunned. He finally reacted and quickly said, This, of course it's serious. I beg young master to show mercy. Chapter 11:22. After a moment of silence, Su Qinchin looked at Governor Li and said, Send someone to raid the Huang family. Give each of the Huang family servants 10 taels of silver. As for the rest, don't leave behind a single tael of silver. Governor Li didn't expect that there would be such a stroke. He couldn't react for a moment. Yes, this subject will do it now. Then, how should we deal with Huang Yaozu? Su Qinchin lowered his eyes and smiled. Since old Master Huang is willing to use all of his family's wealth to save his son's life, sentence him to be sent to the border. He will never return and will not be pardoned. Old Master Huang's face turned pale. What was the difference between this and death? Generally, as long as one's life was still alive, there was always room for negotiation. There would always be a few cases of amnesty in one's life. However, with young Master Qinchen's sentence, everything was over. No. Old Master, our Huang family can't be so late. The people behind Old Master Huang who were originally pleading for mercy were suddenly unwilling. The Huang family had nothing left but Huang Yaozu to be sent to the border for eternity. No one was willing to pay such a price. Instead, it was better for Old Master Huang to work hard to see if he could have another child. Even an adopted one was better than this. Old Master, please reconsider, not to mention others. Even Old Master Huang himself was hesitating. What he wanted was for his son to be able to carry on the family line. How could he be willing to exchange all of his family's wealth for such a result? Looking at Old Master Huang's expression, young Master Qinchen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He said to Governor Li, "It seems that Old Master Huang is unwilling. Lord Li, let's go by the rules." Old Master Huang couldn't say any more words to plead for mercy. He could only watch as his son was taken away and couldn't help but cry loudly. The hall was so lively, but the outside wasn't calm either. The bullies and their families who were escorted by the bailiffs were waiting outside. Although they didn't know what happened, they couldn't help but look at each other when they heard Old Master Huang's cries coming from inside. They felt that something was wrong. Although Old Master Huang didn't contribute all of his family's wealth in the end, the Huang family wouldn't be able to grow after a few days. The landlords and rich merchants of Guangling would hate him to death. Which family didn't have a few unfilial children? Which family of these rich families hadn't done a few shameful things? Unfortunately, Huang Yaozu was bumped into by young Master Qinchen. If he had not been caught by young Master Qinchen, perhaps young Master Qinchen would not have cared about these matters in Guangling. Therefore, these unlucky people would all vent their anger on the Huang family. On this day, in this inconspicuous inn in Guangling, the hedonistic sons of noble families and noble families who had been tyrannical and dangerous in Guangling were all arrested. What awaited them might be beheading, exile, or imprisonment. When they came out of the inn, all of them looked like they were about to collapse. It attracted the curiosity of the passers-by. "Su Qinchen, you're amazing." Only Su Qinchen and Yungu were left in the empty hall. Yungu sat on a chair, propping up her chin as she gazed at young Master Qinchen in snow-white robes. Her eyes were filled with admiration. She had also seen the crimes that Su Qinchen had committed. Su Qinchen had only sat there and said nothing, but those seemingly powerful people were so frightened that they knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. However, Yungu would not plead for mercy for them. Those old people with white hair were crying. Although they were very pitiful, she had seen many rich people bullying ordinary people along the way. Those who were bullied were even more pitiful. Every time she met them, she could only teach those people a lesson and then give them some silver. However, Su Qinchen easily put all those bad guys in jail. In the future, they would never come out to harm ordinary people again. Young Master Qinchen had seen many gazes of admiration, but he suddenly found that Miss Yunji's gaze made him feel more comfortable. With a smile, he raised his eyebrows and said, "How am I amazing? You punished many bad people." Yungu said. "Those were interrogated by Lord Li," Su Qinchen smiled. "But those evidence were given to Lord Li by you." Yungu said. "Those were collected by the Shadow Guard." Su Qinchen said with a gentle smile. Miss Yungu tilted her head and said, "But I feel that those people are very afraid of you, but they are not afraid of Lord Li at all." Although it was Lord Li who was speaking, she clearly felt that those people did not dare to move because of Su Qinchen, who was sitting on the throne, and not because of the stern-looking Lord Li. "You have good eyes," Su Qinchen said with a smile. Yungu said happily, "Of course." Su Qinchen raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a faint smile and said, "Since you have good eyes, how can you not see that those people are liars? Come, tell me, how many times have you been deceived along the way? Yoon-ji's little face immediately turned red. I haven't been deceived that many times. Oh. What? Su Ching-chen looked at her with a smile, took out a few things from his sleeve and put them on the table and asked, "What are these?" This is my hairpin, jade pendant, and my purse. Why are they with you? Meeting young Master Ching-chen's faint smile, Yoon-gu gradually lost her voice. Su Ching-chen looked at her helplessly and sighed softly, "What a stupid girl. You don't even know that you have been deceived. 2 days ago, you gave your jade pendant to the person who buried his father. Do you know that this jade pendant of yours is enough for an ordinary person to live for a lifetime? But, her father is really dead. I didn't have any silver at that time." Yoon-gu argued in a low voice. She was a doctor after all. How could she not know better than Su Ching-chen whether a person was dead or alive? Su Ching-chen said, "The person is dead, but do you know if that is her father?" Yoon-gu was speechless. Su Ching-chen picked up the hairpin on the table and gently put it back on for her. Then he picked up the jade pendant and hung it for her, saying, "Look at your journey. If I found you a few days later, would you not even have money to eat?" Yoon-gu lowered her head in embarrassment. She counted with her fingers and said softly, "I know medicine. I also know how to pick herbs." So she would not go without food. Young Master Ching-chen nodded in agreement, "That's right. You know medicine, but you have to pay for the medical expenses yourself. You know how to pick herbs, but you give them all to others. Then I need help." Yoon-gu was a little depressed. Although she did not know if her father practiced medicine, he left behind a lot of gold, silver and jewelry. Her foster father also had a lot of property. She was the only one who brought a lot of money when she ran away from home. But she was getting poorer and poorer. Young Master Ching-chen smiled and patted her head, saying, "Now you know how stupid you are." Yoon-gu puffed up her cheeks in dissatisfaction and said angrily, "I'm not stupid. Foster father said I'm the smartest." Su Ching-chen threw her a disapproving look. Yoon-gu was immediately discouraged. She muttered sadly, "How could this be? I helped them out of kindness. Why did they lie to me?" Su Ching-chen said softly, "There are many bad people in this world. Do you think that no one dares to bully you like in Glass City? Who told you to run away from home?" As soon as he said that, Yoon-gu looked at Su Ching-chen vigilantly. She also remembered that Su Ching-chen said she was his fiancée the night before she ran away from home. She suddenly felt goosebumps. Why are you here?" Su Ching-chen smiled indifferently, "What do you think? You ran away from home without saying anything. Do you know how anxious your family is? What if you encounter danger? How do you want the Su family to explain to Mr. Shin?" I didn't run away from home. I want to practice medicine everywhere and help the world." Yoon-gu tried to open her eyes wide so that she would not look so guilty. Su Ching-chen did not say anything. He just looked at her calmly with a smile, but it made Yoon-gu feel more and more guilty. "Then, you can't blame me. It's all your fault. I don't want to be your fiancé." Young Master Ching-chen's eyes darkened. He lowered his eyes slightly and asked, "Oh. Why?" Yoon-gu bit her cherry lips and looked at Su Ching-chen with some grievance. "Anyway, I just don't want it." She would not tell Su Ching-chen that she did not like to study. After a moment of silence, young Master Ching-chen smiled and raised his hand to pull her to him. He smiled and said, "I know. You don't want to write or memorize, right?" Yoon-gu felt a little embarrassed that her thoughts were exposed. She muttered softly, so what if I do? I just don't like to study. I'm just very stupid. Young Master Qingshan laughed. He deeply felt that he had bullied the little girl too much. In fact, Yungu was not stupid at all. How could someone who could make Qingjing, his mother, and second aunt praise her for her learning in less than a year be stupid? It was just that the little girl was not very interested in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She spent most of her energy on medicine. Then, what if I don't let you copy books or memorize books in the future? Su Qingchen asked softly. Yunji's eyes lit up and she looked at Su Qingchen in surprise. Su Qingchen's gentle and elegant smile made people unable to help but indulge in it. If you don't have to memorize books or write in the future, are you willing to be my fiancé? This. Yungu hesitated. Young Master Qingshan said lightly, look at you. You were cheated the moment you went out. If you go out with me in the future, no one will dare to cheat you. No matter how many people you save, you won't be out of money. You can save whoever you want. If you can't find medicinal herbs or medical skills, I can also ask the Shadow Guard in the Prince Ding mansion to help you find them. Also, today's incident will not happen again. What do you think? Yungu blinked and felt that her mind was a little messy. However, Su Qingshan's words seemed to make sense. Then we can go out together now. Young Master Qingshan shook his head and smiled. Men and women should not be so close. If we go out together without any relationship, others will misunderstand. It's not good for your reputation. Of course, it's not good for mine either. Look at Li, Zheng, and the rest. They only go out with Prince Ding and second brother. NN. Sister Qingjing only went out with second brother Su other than playing in Glass City. Have you thought about it? If you are not willing, let's go back to Glass City. If you are my fiancé, we can still go out and walk around. It's okay to walk around for a year or so. Young Master Qingshan smiled. Sure, Yungu replied casually as she pondered over it. Young Master Qingshan, is it really a man to abduct a little girl like this? The Shadow Guard outside the door looked at each other. Chapter 11:23. The dizzy Miss Yungu did not know that her momentary daze had caused her to sell everything she was wearing. But even if she figured it out later, she would not have the guts to reject someone again. Young Master Qingshan did not care about the little girl's lack of brains. Seeing Yungu obediently nodding her head, he felt very satisfied. He raised his hand and rubbed the black hair on Yunji's head. His usually calm and handsome face was full of doting. Young Master Qingshan was too outstanding and too aloof. As a result, he saw everything too clearly. Even his emotions were weaker than ordinary people's. Even though he had seen Mo Xiaoyao and Yili's love, Han Mingyue's infatuation with Su Zuidi, and even Feng San, Qin Feng, and his brothers in his family had all obtained happiness. But young Master Qingshan could not understand these feelings. He did not think much of those who were trapped and suffering by love. If he had not met Yungu, even young Master Qingshan would not believe that he would one day do all kinds of boring things like Mo Xiaoyao, who he once thought was extremely stupid. He did not hesitate to trick Yungu into agreeing to be his fiancée. And when Yungu nodded her head and agreed, the joy and satisfaction that emerged in his heart was indescribable. It was like someone had once cursed him, "What is love in this world? Everything has its vanquisher. I hope one day you fall into it and never climb out." Yungu, who was comforted by young Master Qingshan, rubbed her head against his palm comfortably and smiled. Yungu found that after meeting Su Qingshan this time, other than being angry at her for running away from home, Su Qingshan had been very gentle to her. Other than occasionally scolding her for being stupid, he did not teach her a lesson or punish her. Before Su Qingchen could say anything, he was interrupted by the guard who came in to report. Reporting to young master, the head of the Lu family in Guangling City sent someone to send an invitation. The Lu family and the landlords of Guangling are holding a banquet to welcome young master. The guard probably understood that he might have disturbed the young master's good fortune, so he hurriedly pushed an outsider to the front as a shield. Su Qingchen frowned. He had just dealt with a large number of talented and powerful profligate sons of reputable families in Guangling City. Logically speaking, this face had to be given. If it was only Su Qingchen himself, he would naturally not accept these invitations. However, young Master Qingchen had not forgotten that he was also the right Prime Minister of the Prince Ding Mansion. He could not let half of the rich merchants in Guangling flee to Jiangnan after he left. After giving it some thought, Su Qingchen nodded and said, "Got it. We'll be there later." That is, we are not alone. Yungu looked at Su Qingchen indifferently. Su Qingchen, do I have to go too? Su Qingchen smiled and said, "Aren't you my fiancé?" "Why not?" Yungu pouted, not daring to say that she had not thought things through and had been tricked by Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled and pinched Yunji's little face, saying, "Be good, Yungu. Tomorrow, we'll leave Glass City. After that, we'll go wherever you want to go." Hearing this, Yunji's little face lit up and she nodded heavily, saying, "I'll keep my word." Young Master Qingchen smiled and said, "When have I not kept my word?" At night, the Lu family in Guangling City was brightly lit and bustling. More than half of the reputable people in Guangling had gathered here. Although many of the aristocratic families in Guangling City had been dealt with in the past half a day. However, there were not many families like the Huang family who had a lecherous son who acted recklessly and even caused people's lives to be lost. Many who should be punished were punished and those who should be beaten were beaten. Most importantly, no matter what, this young Master Qingchen could not be offended. Not only was young Master Qingchen known throughout the world as the immortal young master, he was also the right Prime Minister of the Prince Ding Mansion. His position was only below Prince Ding and the Princess Consort. If Prince Ding ascended the throne and proclaimed himself as the Emperor, young Master Qingchen would be the rightful Prime Minister who founded the country. Needless to say, young Master Qingchen was Princess Ding's cousin and the little heir's uncle. In short, as long as they wanted to continue living in the Prince Ding Mansion's territory, young Master Qingchen could not be offended. The Lu family was a famous family in Guangling. Although they might not be very wealthy, they were a scholarly family with a heritage of over 100 years. Usually, they were quite strict with their children. At least this time, other than the two branches of the Lu family being found to have used the Lu family's name to oppress the common people, there was nothing too ugly to look at. It was also because of this that the Lu family had the face to set up a banquet and invite young Master Qingchen. Su Qingchen brought Yungu to the Lu family. Master Lu had already brought his family and the family heads of Guangling to wait at the door. "Welcome, young Master Qingchen." Looking at the grandiose display in front of him, Su Qingchen sighed helplessly and said indifferently, "Master Lu, you have troubled yourself. There is no need for these empty formalities." Master Lu stood up after giving his thanks. When he raised his head, he saw a beautiful young lady dressed in light yellow standing beside Su Qingchen looking at them curiously. He could not help but be stunned. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and held Yunji's hand, saying indifferently, "This is my fiancée. Her surname is Shen." "Ah. Greetings, Miss Shen." Master Lu hurriedly said, but at the same time, he was thinking in his heart. He did not seem to have heard of any large family in Glass City with the surname Shen. This young lady's face was full of curiosity and innocence. She did not look like a well-bred young lady from a scholarly family. Yungu was a martial artist and her senses were naturally sharper than ordinary people. The moment Su Qingshan spoke, he clearly felt that the gazes of the crowd were different. There was even some hostility. Yungu looked in that direction and saw a beautiful woman in a moon-white dress standing not far away, staring at him. Although she was a little unhappy, Yungu still remembered the etiquette taught by eldest Madame Su. She nodded slightly at the lady, but she did not expect the lady to sweep her a glance and lower her head. Yungu snorted unhappily in her heart and ignored her. "Young Master Qingshan, Miss Shin, please come in." Master Lu's reaction was also very fast. He was only stunned for a moment before he regained his senses and respectfully invited the two of them in. The Lu Manor had already prepared a banquet and was waiting for Su Qingshan's arrival. However, Yun Ji's arrival was obviously a surprise to everyone. What was more surprising was that this young lady was actually young Master Qingshan's fiancée. Master Lu hesitated for a moment, but still went forward and said with a smile, "Young Master Qingshan, this Miss Shin. Why don't my humble wife and my daughter entertain her? What do you think?" Su Qingshan lowered his head and looked at Yungu, who still had her head lowered. He did not know what she was thinking and said with a smile, "No need, Yungu can just sit with me." Master Huang had no choice but to agree and leave to prepare. Su Qingshan pulled Yungu to sit at the best seat in the banquet and immediately attracted the attention of countless people. It was the first time in Yun Ji's life that she was being watched by so many people. She suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Su Qingshan did not care about her and only reached out to pick up some of her favorite dishes for her. He then turned to the side and chatted with the guests. Chapter 11:24. Yungu was bored as she sat beside Su Qingshan, staring at the delicacies in front of her. She didn't understand what they were saying and didn't like to hear it. She didn't have the appetite to eat as she was stared at by many unkind eyes. She could only sit aside and stare blankly. "Why isn't Miss Shin saying anything? Are you bored?" Just as Yungu was feeling bored to death, a gentle female voice sounded in his ears. Yungu looked up and saw the woman in the white dress that she had seen at the entrance walking towards her. Her voice was soft, but Su Qingshan, who was sitting beside Yungu, heard it. He turned around and looked at the girl. Master Lu, who was sitting on Su Qingshan's right, also looked over. He looked lovingly at the girl and smiled, "This is my daughter, Donruo." The girl hurriedly bowed to Su Qingshan and smiled, "Donruo greets young master." Su Qingshan's eyes flashed and he smiled faintly, "Miss Lu doesn't need to be so courteous." "What's wrong with Yungu? Are you bored?" Su Qingshan only glanced at Lu Donruo before his gaze landed on Yungu again. He asked with concern. At the same time, he felt helpless. Yungu obviously didn't like these social events, but he didn't feel at ease if he didn't bring her along. Yungu looked at Su Qingshan and suddenly felt a little better. She shook her head slightly. Seeing that Su Qingshan only glanced at her indifferently, Miss Lu's eyes dimmed, but she quickly smiled again. She looked at Su Qingshan and said, "Sister Shin must be bored. Why don't Donruo accompany you for a walk in the garden? Although our Lu Manor's garden can't be compared to Glass City, it still has its own style." Yungu turned to look at Su Qingshan. Su Qingshan smiled, "If you want to go then go. If not, we'll go back soon." Although she didn't like this kind of banquet, Yungu knew that Su Qingshan must have his own intentions for attending. She shook her head and said, "I'll go play in the garden." Su Qingshan smiled and nodded. He summoned 2 guards to follow Yungu before letting her leave. This action naturally caused Yungu to pout unhappily. Her martial arts were no worse than those guards. Su Qingshan only smiled faintly and insisted on his own opinion. Young Master Qingshan really cares for Miss Shin. Old Master Lu smiled awkwardly. But in her heart, she cursed, I wonder what's going on with the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family. In the Prince Ding mansion, there were not many princes who took concubines, and the Su family basically did not take any concubines. Now, even some of the young and powerful men in the Prince Ding mansion were learning from Prince Ding. How were the families who had raised many concubine daughters supposed to live? Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, Yunj is the future daughter-in-law of the Su family. Naturally, we have to take good care of her. Young master is right. Come, let me propose a toast to young master. In the back garden of the LV family, LV Donruo was walking around with Yungu. Along the way, LV Donruo kept talking, but Yunji's answers were few and far between. In such a situation, LV Donruo's originally smiling face could not help but become a little gloomy. This girl was simply like a taciturn gourd. She did not open her mouth to speak at all. She did not know why young Master Qingchen liked her. LV Donruo did not like Yungu, and Yungu also did not like the girl in front of her. As soon as the two left the banquet, she chattered non-stop. She kept asking Su Qingchen what he liked to eat, what he hated. In short, 3 sentences would not leave Su Qingchen. How did she know what Su Qingchen liked and disliked? If she wanted to ask, why didn't she ask Su Qingchen directly? Why did she have to ask her? She even pretended that she liked to play with her. Did she think that she did not see her secretly rolling her eyes at the door? Yungu, who was in a bad mood, rarely threw a tantrum in front of outsiders. She walked to the side of the flower terrace and sat down with LV Donruo behind her back, unwilling to leave. LV Donruo looked at Yunji's back and frowned. She walked over and spread an embroidered handkerchief on the flower terrace before carefully sitting down. She frowned and looked at Yungu, saying, Little sister Yungu, which family are you from? We haven't heard of any famous family in Glass City with the surname Shin. We already know each other. You don't have to be so petty. Yungu looked at her silently and said, Our family is not famous. Also, I'm older than you. I'm not your little sister. Yungu could tell at a glance that LV Donruo was only 15 years old. She was 17 years old. Naturally, she was much older than her. However, Yungu forgot that LV Donruo was not a doctor. Naturally, she did not have such good eyesight. Not to mention, Yungu looked young. She looked even younger than the gentle and charming LV Donruo. The smile on LV Donruo's face froze. She looked at Yungu and frowned. So she came from a small family. No wonder she was so rude. LV Donruo rolled her eyes and squeezed out a smile again, saying, Then how did big sister Yungu get to know young Master Qingchen? Yungu was a little unhappy. I happened to see Su Qingchen when I was gathering herbs in the mountains. We got to know each other. The smile on LV Donruo's face deepened. So she was just a herbalist. His expression became even more disgusted and disdainful as he looked at Yungu. Yungu wrinkled her little nose. If LV Donruo did not like her, she did not like her either. She stood up and walked to the other side. LV Donruo, who was left behind, was so angry that her face almost twisted. She was also one of the most noble young ladies in Guangling City. If it were not for young Master Qingchen, she would not have gone to apologize to a little girl who came out of nowhere. Now that she saw Yungu being so rude, she could not care less and scolded angrily, Hey! Do you have any manners at all? You really come from a small family. You don't know the rules at all. Not far away, 2 shadow guards had been paying attention to the situation here. Seeing this, they could not help but look at each other and shook their heads. Was Miss Yungu doing this on purpose or on purpose? If Miss Yungu told LV Donruo that her adoptive father was Shen Yang, LV Donruo would not dare to provoke her. You are the rude one. Miss Yungu was angry. She glared at LV Donruo and said angrily, young ladies from noble families will not be like you and keep asking about Su Qinchin. If you want to know, why don't you ask Su Qinchin yourself? Su Qinchin is my fiancé. You are not allowed to ask. You are the rude one. Do you think I have never seen a young lady from a noble family? After saying that, Miss Yungu snorted disdainfully. Sister Zhang Sister Li and Sister Tianxiang were all young ladies from noble families. They were not as annoying as Miss Lu. Pft, Garde, who was not far away, could not help but burst into laughter. Seeing the two ladies looking over, he quickly waved his hand and said, I have been rude. Miss Shen, please continue. You are not allowed to ask anything. If young Master Qinchin heard it, he would be very happy. Miss Yungu blinked and turned back to look at Miss Lu. Anyway, you go ask Su Qinchin. You are not allowed to ask me. Miss Lu was speechless. She was used to the hypocrisy and civility of ordinary people. She had never seen such a direct person. For a moment, she did not know how to deal with it. Chapter 11:25. After a long while, Miss Lu came to her senses. She snorted and said, anyway, you're not good enough for young Master Qinchin. If you know what's good for you, you'd better go far away. Otherwise, you'll embarrass yourself in the future. Yungu bit her lips and glared at LV Donruo angrily. After a long while, she snorted and a proud smile appeared on her beautiful face. I don't want to. Su Qinchin is mine. You can't take him away. Young Master Qinchin won't marry a wild girl like you. LV Donruo said coldly. So what if I want to marry Su Qinchin? Yungu bared her teeth and said, I'm prettier than you, better at martial arts than you, and better at medicine than you. Humph. LV Donruo said disdainfully, what's the use of that? Without a good family background, you're not good enough for young Master Qinchin even if you're a fairy. Don't bother young Master Qinchin anymore, or else. Or else what? Young Master Qinchin's voice came from behind her. It was as refreshing as a summer breeze, but it made LV Donruo's facial expression stiffen. Looking at young Master Qinchin who was walking in the moonlight, LV Donruo's eyes flashed with embarrassment, but she quickly hid it. She said shyly, young Master Qinchin, Donruo. Su Qinchin walked past LV Donruo and went directly to Yungu. He raised her little face and asked with a smile, what's wrong? Did someone bully you? Yungu rolled her eyes and ignored him. She would not be bullied. LV Donruo, who was ignored by Su Qinchin, was frozen in place. Her face turned green and white. She obviously did not expect that the gentle and elegant young Master Qinchin would not give her face. Seeing that Yungu was fine, Su Qinchin turned to look at LV Donruo and said lightly, Miss Lu, it's up to me to decide what kind of person is good enough for the Su family. It has nothing to do with you. The Su family doesn't need you to worry about it. If you're really bored, why don't you worry about yourself? LV Donruo's eyes reddened. She looked at Su Qinchin pitifully and said, young Master Qinchin, you misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. Donruo just. Yungu poked her head out from behind Su Qinchin and grinned at LV Donruo. Her little face was full of pride. Su Qinchin lowered his head and saw her smiling face. He chuckled and said, why are you so happy? Yungu snorted and said, she asked what you like to eat, and what you hate. I don't know. You can tell her yourself. Oh. Do you really want me to tell her? Su Qinchin asked with a chuckle. Yungu was stunned. After a moment of silence, she grabbed his arm and threatened him, you're not allowed to tell her. Otherwise, What's wrong with you? Su Qingchen smiled. Facing Su Qingchen's smiling eyes, he couldn't bring himself to say the words, "I'll beat you up." Yungu now somewhat understood why she had never dared to use her martial arts against Su Qingchen despite being so powerful. She couldn't bear to hit him at all. What if she broke it? The smile on Su Qingchen's face widened. He raised his hand to stroke her hair lovingly and said with a smile, "Okay, I won't tell her. But I can tell you that you have to remember it seriously." "Yes." Yungu nodded seriously. "Okay, let's go." Holding Yun Ji's small hand, young Master Qingchen turned around and walked out. He didn't even look at LV Donroa, who was standing at the side. Aren't you going to attend the banquet?" "Didn't I attend it? We're leaving Guangling tomorrow." "Where does Yungu want to go?" "I want to go. I want to go to a lot of fun places," Yungu said with a smile. "Then let's go." The two guards who followed behind them turned back to look at LV Donroa, who was left in the garden. Under the moonlight, her moon-white clothes and pale face looked a little frightening. What happened to her? Was she hit too hard? Stupid. Her acupoints were sealed. Yungu looked at her small hand that was being held by young Master Qingchen and turned back to look at LV Donroa, who was standing in the garden in a daze. She lowered her head guiltily. After leaving Guangling, the two of them traveled around and saved people. Just as Su Qingchen said, no one dared to bully her when she was with young Master Qingchen. In less than 2 months, Yungu saved more and more people and became more and more famous. Although she couldn't be compared to Shenyang, who was known as the Miracle Doctor, she still received the title of Little Fairy Doctor. It was because Yunji's medical skills were superb at such a young age and she was as beautiful as a fairy. The relationship between the two of them became more and more harmonious. Young Master Qingchen was also a person who loved the joy of mountains and rivers. Naturally, he was even more indulgent. Far away in the Prince Ding mansion in Glass City, the white-haired Prince Ding was facing all kinds of files and memorials in front of him. His brows were tightly knitted and his murderous aura was threatening. Where is young Master Qingchen? In the study, a man in gray lowered his head and reported, "Prince, young Master Qingchen and Miss Shen just returned from the southern border. Judging by their route, they seem to be planning to go to West Hill." Prince Ding gritted his teeth. In other words, they don't plan to come back. This seems to be. Prince Ding's handsome face darkened and a strange light flashed in his eyes. "Go. Tie him up and bring him back here for I. Instead of meddling in politics, he brings the young lady on a sightseeing tour." Prince Ding was extremely resentful. Now, he couldn't even bring Miss Li on a sightseeing tour. The world had just settled down and there were many things waiting to be done. He didn't even have time to spend with Miss Li. Prince, isn't this not very good? Young Master Qingchen was the princess' cousin. If he got angry, wouldn't the prince be the unlucky one? If the prince got angry, they would still be the unlucky ones. Go. I will discuss with the Su family. It's time for Su Qingchen and Yunji's wedding. What kind of scandal is it to always bring an unmarried girl out? Prince Ding's eyes flashed and he came up with a brilliant idea. It was time for Su Qingchen to get married. After the marriage, it was almost time for him to take over the Su family. After the marriage, they would have to give birth to children. After giving birth, they would have to educate the children. He just needed to ensure that Su Qingchen wouldn't run around in the next 3 to 5 years. As for the future, Prince Ding snorted. What does it have to do with I? This subordinate obeys. Chapter 1126. Yungu, who had just returned to the Central Plains from Nanjiang, was in a good mood. She had never been so happy to travel around since she was a child. During this trip to Nanjiang, she had not only seen many unique herbs in Nanjiang, but Su Qingchen had also taken her to visit several famous doctors in Nanjiang. The medical skills and philosophies, which were very different from those in the Central Plains, made Yungu more enlightened on the road of medicine. After the two of them entered Shattered Snow Pass and returned to the Central Plains, they walked slowly westward towards West Hill. Although there was a big grudge between West Hill and the Prince Ding mansion, both sides had stopped fighting and recuperated. West Hill people did not dare to attack young Master Qingchen easily. However, no one expected that something would happen before they reached An City, the current capital of West Hill. On this day, Yungu and Su Qingchen stayed in an inn in a small town near An City. Their destination was indeed the current capital of West Hill. As the right chief minister of the Prince Ding mansion, Su Qingchen came to the capital of West Hill so casually without saying hello, which was somewhat provocative. However, An City was now the most prosperous and lively place in West Hill. It would be a pity if they did not go to West Hill after coming here. More importantly, the two of them planned to take the road from West Hill to the western region, so they had to pass through An City. Because of the tiredness from the previous day's journey, Yungu did not see Su Qingchen, who usually woke up earlier than her, when she got up the next morning. Although it was a little strange, she did not think much about it. Su Qingchen did not know martial arts, so he was different from her. Maybe he was tired these days and fell asleep, which was rare. Yungu went down the stairs of the inn and went to the lobby downstairs to order some simple breakfast. Then, he slowly ate it. However, after Yungu finished her breakfast and waited for a while, she found that something was wrong. Not only did Su Qingchen not appear, even the bodyguards who had been following them to protect them did not appear. They could not have all fallen asleep, right? Thinking of this, Yun Ji's heart suddenly jumped. She did not care about anything else and directly rushed upstairs. She pushed open Su Qingchen's room, only to see that it was clean and tidy, as if no one had lived there at all. She went to check the rooms of the bodyguards, only to find that they had fainted and were unconscious in the room. Su Qingchen. Yungu immediately became anxious. She quickly detoxified the poison for the guards and asked anxiously, "What happened? Where is Su Qingchen?" The guards were at a loss at first, but when they heard Yun Ji's words, they were shocked. He rushed into Su Qingchen's room and found that she was gone. How could this be? This young Master Qingchen was taken away by someone. A guard looked at the half-opened window and said in a low voice, "Quick, inform all the shadow guards to look for young Master Qingchen." "Okay." A shadow guard responded and quickly rushed out. Yungu only felt panic in her heart. Now that she was with Su Qingchen, she didn't have to worry about anything. Now that Su Qingchen had suddenly disappeared, she immediately felt at a loss. Su Qingchen. Woo. How could this be? Who would kidnap him? He doesn't have any enemies. Seeing the little girl sobbing, the shadow guard was suddenly at a loss and panicked. He quickly said, "Miss Shen, don't worry. Young Master Qingchen is a good person. He will be fine. By the way, the pavilion master of the West Hill Yanwang Chamber is a good friend of young Master Qingchen. Maybe we can ask him for information. As the saying goes, a strong dragon can't suppress a local snake. Although we have some people in the West Hill, they are definitely not as good as the Yanwang Chamber." After hearing the shadow guard's words, Yungu quickly wiped her tears and got up to walk out of the door. "Let's go. Su Qingchen doesn't know martial arts. What if he gets bullied?" The shadow guard behind her sighed helplessly. A rare look of guilt flashed across his determined face. Outside the Yanwang Chamber, sickly scholar looked at the girl in yellow in front of him with a sinister expression. He frowned and said, Big Brother is in seclusion. He won't see anyone. Yungu bit the corner of her lips, but still stubbornly stood in front of Sickly Scholar and refused to back down. Isn't Pavilion Master Ling and Su Qingchen good friends? Su Qingchen is missing. I want to ask Pavilion Master Ling if there is any news. She also knew that it was rude to come to the Pavilion Master's door rashly, but for the sake of news about Su Qingchen, there was nothing she could do. Su Qingchen had been missing for almost 2 days. Whether it was the shadow guard of the Prince Ding Mansion or the Jinan Palace of the West Hill, there was no news. This made Yungu more and more afraid. Sickly Scholar sneered and said indifferently, the Yanwang Chamber has long been disbanded. Even if Big Brother comes out to see you, he won't tell you any news. What's more, isn't Su Qingchen a member of the Prince Ding Mansion? The Prince Ding Mansion has spies all over the world. Do you still need the Yanwang Chamber to take action? When the Yanwang Chamber agreed to help Lei Jinting kill Yili, it sacrificed more than half of the masters of the Yanwang Chamber. After returning, Ling Taihan ordered the Yanwang Chamber to be disbanded. Although Ling Taihan said that he was tired of the Jianghu life and wanted to concentrate on martial arts, Sickly Scholar, as his sworn brother, how could he not know that Ling Taihan did this to prevent the Prince Ding Mansion from having ambitions and to protect the remaining people of the Yanwang Chamber? For a master like Ling Taihan, unless Mo Xiaoyao personally led a team to encircle and suppress him, no one in the world could hurt him. However, the other people of the Yanwang Chamber were different. Some of the second-rate and third-rate masters were simply food for the Prince Ding Mansion's cavalry. Although it was the Yanwang Chamber that made the first move, the Yanwang Chamber, which used to be famous all over the world, was now gone. It was impossible to say that there was no resentment in his heart. What's more, Sickly Scholar was not a magnanimous person. He was more than happy that Su Qingchen was missing. Go away. I want to see Pavilion Master Ling. I don't want to talk to you. After being stopped here for so long, even if Yungu was ignorant of worldly affairs, she could tell that this person was deliberately making things difficult for her. She was already upset because of Su Qingchen's safety. At this time, her temper was even worse. She glared at Sickly Scholar and said angrily. Sickly Scholar's expression changed. He sneered and said, You want to see Big Brother? Okay, I'll let you in if you beat me. Yungu was not long-winded. She pulled out a short sword and stabbed at Sickly Scholar. Sickly Scholar's weapon of choice was a short saber, and as soon as they clashed, the two of them immediately became entangled in a fight. Sickly Scholar was proficient in the art of poison. It was impossible to guard against him. Ordinary people in Jianghu were not willing to fight with him. However, Yungu was different. She was proficient in medicine. Since ancient times, there was a saying that medicine and poison were inseparable. After returning from the southern border this time, his understanding of poison arts had risen to a whole new level. Therefore, Sickly Scholar's poison did not have any effect on her. The two could only fight with their real abilities. Although Sickly Scholar was 10 years older than Yungu, in terms of martial arts, he was not Yun Jiyi's opponent. Originally, among the 3 leaders of the Yanwang Chamber, his aptitude and martial arts were the worst. In the early years, he was plagued with illness. If it were not for his poison skills, his martial arts would only be second-rate. However, Yungu was a martial arts genius that even Mo Xiaoyao praised. In less than a quarter of an hour, only Yungu was left suppressing Sickly Scholar. Chapter 1127. Third Brother, Stop. A deep male voice came from inside, and a man in blue clothes walked out. Upon hearing his voice, Sickly Scholar immediately withdrew his attack and dodged to the side. Yungu also stopped her attack at the same time. It was because she could feel a vast and mighty aura that covered the sky and covered the earth the moment the man appeared. It was the same as when she was facing Prince Ding. Yungu knew very well that it was impossible for her to win against this man with her martial arts. You are Pavilion Masterling. Although she was facing an expert she couldn't win against, Yungu didn't retreat. Ling Taihan looked at the little girl in front of him with interest. With his age, this little girl was a little young to be his daughter. Even Ling Taihan was very tolerant towards such a cute little girl. I am Ling Taihan. Little girl, your martial arts are not bad. What is your name? Yungu bit the corner of her lips and whispered, my name is Shin Yungu. I want to ask Pavilion Master Ling to help me check if there is any news about Su Qinchin. Seeing the unconcealable anxiety in Yunji's beautiful eyes, Ling Taihan shook his head. Seeing Yunji's charming smile slowly fade, Ling Taihan smiled and said, you don't have to worry. Su Qinchin will be fine. How do you know? Yungu asked. Ling Taihan smiled and said, with Su Qinchin's identity, there are not many people in the world who have the ability to kidnap him. Among them, there are almost no people who have a grudge against him. If you are really worried about him, you can go back to Glass City to take a look. Glass City. Yungu bit her lips. Glass City was too far from here. If she went back to Glass City to find Sister Li, to save Su Qinchin, what if something happened to Su Qinchin during this time? Seeing the tears in the little girl's eyes, Ling Taihan sighed helplessly and said, Miss Shin, if you believe me, go back to Glass City to take a look. Maybe when you go back, Su Qinchin is already in Glass City. If he was really kidnapped, and even the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce and Jinan Palace couldn't find any information, it would be useless for you to stay here. Why don't we go back first? Yungu nodded and quickly raised her hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She said, I understand. Sorry for bothering you, Pavilion Master Ling. Thank you. With that, Yungu cupped her hands towards Ling Taihan before turning around and leaving. Big brother, are we just going to let this girl go like that? Sickly Scholar said with some displeasure as he watched Yunji's figure gradually disappear. Ling Taihan laughed heartily. Then, he raised his hand and patted his sworn younger brother's shoulder. He said with a smile, she's just a 15 or 16-year-old girl. You still have the nerve to bully her. Moreover, third brother, it's not that big brother is looking down on you, but if it's really one-on-one, you definitely won't be this girl's match. I didn't expect Su Qinchin to find such an innocent girl. Who exactly kidnapped Su Qinchin? Sickly Scholar asked with a frown. Previously, he didn't reject Yungu completely out of spite. It was because the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce really didn't have any news of Su Qinchin. Ling Taihan smiled. In this world, who else but Mo Xiaoyao can kidnap Su Qinchin and also have the ability to help him? In a secluded corner not far from Yungu, there was an inconspicuous carriage. The man sitting in the carriage was incomparably handsome. His clothes were as white as snow, and he looked like an immortal. However, at this moment, the expression on his face didn't have the slightest bit of immortal aura. Instead, it made the person opposite him shudder uncontrollably. Opposite him, the Su family's third son, Su Qingfeng, who had just been married for 2 months, looked at the person opposite him with a helpless expression. Big brother, don't look at me. I'm just following orders. If you're angry, then go find the person who gave the order. He finally got married and married a beautiful girl. Didn't he want to enjoy the happiness of being a newlywed at home? Why did he have to come all the way to this godforsaken place and be hated by his big brother? Mo Xiaoyao. Young Master Qinchin lowered his eyes. He didn't even need to think to know who came up with this rotten idea. When he woke up and found that he was kidnapped, young Master Qinchin didn't panic. Sure enough, he soon saw his third brother appear in front of him with a timid expression. He smiled apologetically at him with a guilty conscience. Needless to say, there was no one else who could come up with such a shameful idea other than someone in Glass City. At least, Su Qingfeng didn't have the guts to act on his own. Su Qingfeng nodded repeatedly. Being sent out to carry out such a ridiculous task, he also complained in his heart. Helplessly, as the other party's subordinate, he could only choose to obey orders. However, in his heart, he couldn't wait for his big brother to go back and find trouble with someone. TSK. Big brother, it seems that Miss Shen is also very good to you. Through the curtains of the car window, Su Qingfeng saw Miss Yungu, who had just left the Yanwang chamber. Her eyeballs were about to fall out, but she didn't stop walking forward. For the past 2 days, they had been secretly following Yungu. Naturally, they had seen clearly what Yungu had done. Unfortunately, although Yunji's martial arts were strong, her experience in the underworld was close to zero. Naturally, she couldn't discover Su Qingfeng, who had undergone professional training. Looking at the lonely figure of the little girl in the distance, Su Qingchen's eyes flashed with a trace of pity and heartache. He said in a low voice, "Are you done? Let me down." Su Qingfeng shook his head repeatedly and said, "That won't do. The order I received was to bring you back. Also, big brother. Don't you want to see how much Miss Shen cares about you?" Su Qingchen was silent. Young Master Qinchin had always been a perfectionist. However, Miss Yungu was really a little slow when it came to feelings. Although Yungu had now completely accepted the fact that she was his fiancée, it was still because of the affection between them. Even he himself didn't know how much of it was because of her feelings for him. But, thinking of that pair of sparkling eyes filled with tears, young Master Qinchin only felt a throbbing pain in his heart. "Let me down." In the end, his heartache for Yungu exceeded his desire to know the answer. Young Master Qinchin gave up this opportunity without hesitation. Su Qingfeng helplessly rolled his eyes. He smiled flatteringly at young Master Qinchin and said, "If that's the case. Big brother, I'm sorry." With a raise of his hand, Su Qingfeng knocked young Master Qinchin unconscious in the carriage. With young Master Qinchin's intelligence, it was best to knock him unconscious and bring him back to Glass City directly. Otherwise, even if he couldn't move, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause along the way. Thinking of Prince Ding's earnest instructions before leaving, although Su Qingfeng was very disdainful, he had to admit that it was very reasonable. Yungu rushed to Glass City day and night. However, because she was blocked by 2 groups of people on the way, when she finally returned to Glass City, she was 2 days later than the expected journey. Thinking that Su Qingchen's life and death were still unknown, Yungu couldn't help but hate herself for being useless. If she was as powerful as Sister Li, she would definitely be able to find Su Qingchen and not come back dejectedly to ask Sister Li for help. However, the scene after entering Glass City made Yungu feel a little lost. The Prince Ding mansion was peaceful and quiet, as if nothing had happened. She had clearly sent a few shadow guards who were following Su Qingchen back to Glass City to report. She then caught a servant of the Prince Ding mansion and asked. The servant actually said that the prince and the princess were not in the mansion. They had gone to the Su family because the eldest son of the Su family, young Master Qinchin, was getting married and the wedding was set for today. Chapter 11:28. Yungu was stunned. She couldn't figure out what was going on. She said in a daze, So, Su Qingchen is fine. The servant looked at her strangely and replied, "What can happen to young Master Qinchin? Young Master Qinchin is very capable." Then, when did Su Qingchen come back? Young Master Qingchen came back yesterday. It just so happens that Miss Shen has also come back. She can make it in time for young master's wedding. After the servant finished speaking with a chuckle, he bowed to Yungu and left. Yungu sat in a daze at the entrance of the Prince Ding mansion. The guards at the entrance all knew this girl and didn't bother her. Thinking about how she had been living in the open all these days and how she had been robbed, Yungu couldn't help but feel wronged and her eyes reddened. Even if Su Qingchen didn't want her anymore, he didn't have to come back secretly to get married. He should have at least left her a message. This was too much. Thinking about how Su Qingchen had secretly come back to get married, Yungu felt even more upset. Liar. Big liar, he said he would accompany me to practice medicine and have fun. What fiancé and fiancé? Su Qingchen was a big liar. The little girl's aggrieved expression made even the guards at the entrance unable to look straight at her. Finally, they couldn't help but ask, Miss Shin, what happened to you? Who bullied you? Could it be that the little girl was really bullied? Should they quickly report to the princess consort? The princess consort seemed to like this little girl. Yungu blinked and nodded silently. What if someone lied to you? Beat him. Guard A said. Beat him up. Guard B said. Kick him. Guard D, kill him. Guard C said. Yunji's pretty little face showed hesitation. She said hesitantly, no, he can't stand it. What if I break him? The guards looked at each other. She was already so upset and yet she was still worried about breaking him. It seemed like she had a conflict with her lover. Miss Shen, maybe he didn't lie to you on purpose. If you have any doubts, you should ask him clearly. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life if you miss out on the person you love. Someone I love. Yunji's little face turned red. That's right. He lied to you and made you so sad, but you still can't hit him. Isn't he your sweetheart? This. Yunji's little face blushed and began to turn pale. Then, what if he doesn't want me anymore and goes to be with someone else? Take it back and make him change his mind. Bodyguard A said. Take him back. If he doesn't change his mind, beat him to death. Guard B said. Snatch him back. If he doesn't change his mind, feed him poison and poison him to death. Bodyguard third said. Snatch. Just as the third bodyguard opened his mouth, Yungu had already turned around and said with a smile, got it, we'll talk after we snatch it back. Yungu did not enter through the front door of the Su family. Instead, he leaped over the wall and went straight to Su Qingchen's courtyard. The Su estate was indeed bustling with noise and excitement. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and the outer courtyard was bustling with activity. In comparison, the inner court was much quieter. Just as she reached the door of Su Qingchen's room, she could faintly hear Su Qingchen's voice coming from inside. Lady Yungu was instantly enraged and lifted her leg to kick Su Qingchen's door. Yunj, why are you here? Come with me. Murong Ting's voice suddenly came from behind. Yungu was stunned. Before she could react, Murong Ting and Hua Tianxiang each grabbed one of her hands and dragged her away. Ugh! Sister Ting, Sister Tianxiang, what are you doing? I'm looking for Su Qingchen. Yungu said angrily. Qingjing followed beside her and covered her mouth with a smile. What nonsense are you saying? Today is a big day, how can you see the groom now? Come with us, we've been looking for you everywhere. Looking for me? Yungu, who did not know what was going on, was dragged out of Su Qingchen's courtyard by Murong Ting and Hua Tianxiang into another courtyard in a daze. Then, many familiar and unknown people rushed up to help her change her clothes, put on her makeup, and tie her hair. In the end, she was covered by a red veil and went out to perform the wedding ceremony in a daze. From beginning to end, Yoon-gu was in a daze. She did not know what was going on at all. By the time Yoon-gu came back to her senses, she had already performed the ceremony and was sent to the bridal chamber. Under the red veil of mandarin ducks playing in the water, Yoon-gu blinked in confusion and raised her hand to remove the veil on her head. Only to hear a creak from the door was pushed open and then closed. A light footstep walked in her direction. For some reason, Yoon-gu suddenly became a little nervous. Her palms, which were originally holding the red wedding dress tightly, were full of sweat. Her eyes lit up and her red veil was gently lifted. Yoon-gu raised her head and saw a man in a bright red robe in front of her. There was a faint smile on his immortal-like handsome face. His entire person was set off by the festive red, making him look even more noble and joyful. Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and lowered his body to plant a light kiss on her lips. He said with a smile, "It's me, Yoon-gu. Are you happy that we got married today?" Happy. Yoon-gu could not help but want to glare at him fiercely. However, under his gentle gaze, her cheeks seemed to be burning. She could not help but feel a trace of joy and sweetness in her heart. It turned out that Su Qingchen did not want her anymore. He did not want to secretly marry someone else. As long as you're happy. Young Master Qingchen smiled faintly and said, "From now on, Yoon-gu is my wife. Come, let's drink a cup of nuptial wine first." Young Master Qingchen handed over a wine cup and looked at Yoon-gu with a smile. Facing his smiling handsome face, Yoon-gu only felt dizzy in her head. She raised her wine cup in a daze and crossed her arms to drink together. A cup of nuptial wine. From now on, they were bound by wings and branches and grew old together. Under the bright candles, the couple raised their cups and drank together. There was a faint smile and tenderness in their eyes. The sound of firecrackers came from afar. The melodious sound of musical instruments and the hubbub of voices made this place even more tranquil. At this moment, the flowers were fragrant and the moon was shady. Chapter 11:29. Alluring dance. Yaoji was 10 years old when she became a dancer. Before that, she was the daughter of a 4th-grade official, though she was not a noble. She was neither too young nor too old. She was the daughter of a famous family. However, there were all kinds of conflicts in the imperial court. When her father committed a felony and the whole family was confiscated, she was not willing to mention her former name after she fell into the musical house. Just like when she was 13, Yaoji officially welcomed guests. After a dance in the alluring house, she became the #1 dancer in the Chu capital. It was also on that day that Yaoji met Muyang. It was the time when a girl of 13 or 14 years old had her first awakening of love, even in a place like the alluring house. Though she had just started to receive guests, Yaoji had been in the alluring house for more than 2 years. Naturally, she had seen enough of the sisters in the alluring house being heartbroken for men. When she saw Muyang for the first time, Yaoji was not moved. At that time, Muyang was only 18 years old. He was young and handsome in white. It was the time when he was riding a horse, leaning against a slanted bridge and full of red sleeves. That day, after the dance, Yaoji was a little breathless and nervous. Today was the first day of her performance, which was also related to her life in the next few years. If she succeeded, she would become a new dancer in the alluring house, and then be a pure and noble girl who was admired by everyone. If she failed, even if she was as beautiful as a fairy, she could only do the inferior sex business like many unknown sisters. Women were always particularly naive and persistent in this aspect. They knew that it would be the same in the end, but they still wanted to seize the opportunity in the next few years. Maybe, it would be different. Miss, are you all right? In the cheers, Yaoji hurried down the stage and went to her residence in the backyard. Because she was too smart, she passed by a man and lost her balance. She almost bumped into the wall beside her. Just when Yaoji thought she was going to be disfigured, a hand circled her waist, brought her back, and asked in a low voice. Yaoji was stunned. As soon as she looked up, she saw the man in white in front of her. He was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament. She looked at him with a faint smile in her eyes, but unlike many other guests who always had a trace of annoyance, there was only a faint worry and warmth. I'm fine. Thank you for your help. Yaoji pushed his hand away and bowed slightly. My name is Mu Yang. Miss, you dance very well. The man smiled. Yaoji suddenly realized that she had heard of Mu Yang's name before. The heir of Marquis Mu Yang's mansion was also a well-known and ambitious aristocratic family in the capital city. Although the sisters in Qingqing Lane often mentioned him, they had only heard of his name because Mu Yang had never set foot in a brothel. Naturally, Yaoji did not expect to see him in such a place. Looking at the handsome man in front of her, Yaoji frowned slightly. Although many people lived up to their reputations, it was disappointing to see such a handsome young man frequenting brothels. Seeming to understand Yaoji's gaze, Mu Yang smiled bitterly and said, I came here with some friends. This Qingqing Lane is really not small. May I know where Changyun Pavilion is? Changyun Pavilion was where the most famous courtesan in Qingqing Lane, Miss Changyun, lived. Yaoji nodded and pointed him in the direction. The reason why Mu Yang came here had nothing to do with her. The change in her expression at that moment was just a little surprise because the news she heard was different from the reality. Yo! Isn't this our young Master Mu? A melodious male voice with a hint of playfulness rang out from behind. They turned around and saw a man in red strolling toward them. Young Master Feng San. The young Mu Yang was not bad-tempered. He greeted the man in red very politely. Young Master Feng San was a frequent visitor to brothels. Although Yaoji had never seen him, she had heard of him for a long time. Feng San was the son of a concubine of the richest family in the Chu capital, while Mu Yang was the heir of Marquis Mu Yang's mansion. With Mu Yang's status, it was definitely polite for him to take the initiative to greet Feng San. But Feng San obviously did not appreciate it. He raised his sword-like eyebrows and looked at Mu Yang with a faint smile. It's really rare. I didn't expect Heir Mu to have such a refined interest. Isn't this Miss Yaoji? Miss Yaoji's dance is so beautiful. I really admire you. Feng San's words were a little flippant, but it was not excessive in such a place. Mu Yang was already considered a handsome and elegant man, but Feng San's appearance was even more handsome than his. The mocking smile on his lips made him look even more unruly. It was not just because of Feng San's appearance, but something else. Although his words were deliberately flirting, Yaoji did not dislike it. Young Master Feng San, who was dressed in red, was indeed a person who was hard to dislike. Mu Yang did not argue with Feng Zhiyao. He just smiled faintly and said, I have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Miss Yaoji, goodbye. Heir Mu, take care, Yaoji said faintly. She glanced at Mu Yang's figure leaving Cloud Pavilion, then turned around and threw it to the back of her mind. After that day, Yaoji and Mu Yang did not have much interaction, but gradually became familiar with Feng Zhiyao. It was hard not to be familiar with Feng San in Qingqing Lane. Because young Master Feng San lived in Qingqing Lane for at least half a month every month. In Qingqing Lane, there was even a room specially reserved for young Master Feng San, and there were many rooms like this in other places in the capital. After interacting with Feng San for a long time, Yaoji gradually understood that young Master Feng San was not a playboy or a pervert in the eyes of others. Because when they met in private, Feng Xiao's eyes were always clear and calm, without a trace of fluctuation. Because young Master Feng San often supported her, and because Yaoji's dancing skills were indeed the best in the capital, Yaoji firmly held the title of the #1 courtesan in the capital in just 2 months. She was in the limelight for a while. The next time she met Mu Yang was at the beginning of the 2nd year. At that time, Mu Yang was still the most proud heir of Marquis Mu Yang's residence, and Yaoji was already famous as the #1 dancer in the capital. Even many influential members of the imperial family in the capital had invited her to perform. To see her alone, one needed to spend a lot of money. Meeting Mu Yang again was an accident. Yaoji became the #1 courtesan in the capital, and naturally stole the limelight from the original courtesan of Qingqing Lane, Chang Yun. It was inevitable to be hated by others, so Yaoji had always been very quiet. With their background, they did not have the qualifications to be pure, but Yaoji did not expect that Chang Yun would collude with the girls of Qingqing Lane to ruin her chastity when they went out for a walk. Chastity seemed to be a joke to people like them, but it was also very important. Now she could be the #1 courtesan, and chat with others was worth a lot of money. But once she lost this, she would soon be reduced to the same situation as an ordinary prostitute. Yaoji naturally did not want to be like this, so the moment she felt uncomfortable, she endured the pain and hid. Chapter 1130. Miss, are you all right? A faint voice, with a trace of familiar worry, came from behind the rockery where she was hiding. However, this relationship was no different from arsenic poison to the current her. I'm fine. Without looking at the person behind her, Yaoji stood up and staggered forward. Miss Yaoji. Mu Yang was a little worried and pulled Yaoji. Seeing her flushed cheeks, he suddenly realized, You. What's wrong with you? I'll ask someone to call a doctor. Yaoji, who was already swaying unsteadily, fell into Mu Yang's arms when Mu Yang pulled her. Yaoji only felt that her mind was in a mess. She grabbed Mu Yang's hand and gritted her teeth to maintain the last trace of consciousness. It's too late. It's too late. I remember there's a pool in front. Throw me in. But. Mu Yang frowned. Although it was spring now, it was still the end of February. The pool was a little cold for men, not to mention women. It's okay. I can swim. Please. Mu Yang was also a son of an aristocratic family and had seen many private tricks. Seeing Yaoji so insistent, he nodded and said, In that case, I'm sorry to offend you. That day, Yaoji fell into the water and was saved by Marquis Mu Yang's son. She was sick for a month. But Yaoji also fell in love with that gentle and cheerful young man. He, not only helped her, but also saved her life. In the following years, Yaoji's reputation grew. With the support of young Master Feng San, Marquis Mu Yang's son and other sons of nobles in the capital, no one dared to make trouble in Qingqing Lane. When Yaoji was 20 years old, she officially became the owner of Qingqing Lane and no longer received guests. She only danced when the nobles in the capital or even the palace needed her to perform. The rest of the time, she sat alone on the 2nd floor of Qingqing Lane and looked at the bustling downstairs indifferently. Miss, Marquis Mu Yang is here. Outside the door, a maid reported in a low voice. Yaoji turned around and said with a faint tiredness on her enchanting face, Please go back, Marquis Mu Yang. I won't see any guests. Seeing the maid leave with a little surprise, Yaoji smiled faintly. In the blink of an eye, they had known each other for almost 10 years. Yaoji couldn't remember when they started dating. Her own Feng Xiao had once smiled and sighed, Yaoji, falling in love with someone like Mu Yang, you're really asking for trouble. Whether it's sentiment or reason, you should also choose this young master. At that time, Yaoji just smiled faintly. How could she not know that with Mu Yang's identity, there would be no connection between them at all? On the contrary, Feng Zhiyao, who was born a concubine of a rich family, would have less pressure. However, she had never felt her heart flutter in front of the handsome young Master Feng San. Because she knew that young Master Feng San already had someone in his heart. And Mu Yang only had eyes for her. However, such days couldn't last long. Although he had already passed his prime, he still refused to get married. However, 2 months ago, he finally couldn't withstand the pressure from the Mu family and got engaged to the young lady of the Sun family. After that, Yaoji was not surprised that Miss Sun, who was his fiancée, came to her. Thinking of what Princess Ding said at the Fenghua building yesterday, Yaoji smiled bitterly and a trace of determination flashed across her beautiful face. Even though she had only seen Ding Wangfei twice, Yaoji had to admit that no matter what, that Wang Fei was someone she envied. She had a noble background, a husband who could shelter her from the wind and rain wholeheartedly, an open-minded mind, and an ability and intelligence that were different from ordinary women. She should let go when she wanted to. Perhaps she really should leave. Yaoji lowered her head and stroked her still flat belly with a faint smile. Princess Ding was right. As long as she wanted to live well, she could always live a good life. Moreover, she was not alone now. Yaoji. There was a flurry of footsteps outside the door. Soon, Mu Yang appeared at the door and looked at her with an unsightly expression. The servants of Qingqing Lane followed Mu Yang worriedly. Obviously, they didn't dare to stop the heir of Marquis Mu Yang's residence. Yaoji waved her hand to let the servants leave. Looking at him, she smiled faintly and said, "What do you mean by this?" Although Qingqing Lane is a brothel, Yaoji hasn't received guests for many years. Yaoji. Haven't you had enough? What happened at the Fenghua building yesterday made Mu Yang very unhappy. However, his years of relationship with Yaoji weren't fake, so he immediately came to Qingqing Lane to find her as soon as he calmed down. He didn't expect to be refused at the door. Yaoji sneered and said, "I've had enough. Please don't come to Qingqing Lane in the future. Otherwise, you might run into Mrs. Sun and Miss Sun on the street." "What do you mean?" Mu Yang frowned. Yaoji waved her hand and shook her head, "Nothing. Please go back." Looking at Yaoji's silent expression, Mu Yang sighed helplessly and said, "Yaoji, I'm doing this for our future. You know, Marquis Mu Yang's residence. It's impossible for me to marry you as my legal wife. Can't you suffer a little for my sake?" Yaoji looked at him calmly and said, "I'm not used to suffering, and you don't have to. I hope your highness can take into account our many years of friendship and let us part on good terms." You. Knowing Yaoji's temper, it was impossible to persuade her in a short time. Mu Yang could only sigh and said in a low voice, "I'll go back first. Think about it carefully." Looking at his back, Yaoji suddenly said, "Mu Yang, after so many years, we've both changed. Don't come here in the future. You're no longer the gentle and candid young man, and I'm no longer the young girl who only wanted love. We've both grown up and changed." Mu Yang's body paused for a moment before he left silently. "Miss." Outside the door, the servant girl looked worriedly at Yaoji, who was a little absent-minded. Yaoji came to herself and smiled faintly, "Pack up. I'm going out." "Where are you going?" "Prince Ding Mansion." Coming out of the Prince Ding Mansion, Yaoji breathed a long sigh of relief. Selling Qingqing Lane to Princess Ding, Yaoji didn't know if it was an impulse, but when she really did it, she didn't feel as reluctant as she imagined. With the money earned from these years in selling Qingqing Lane, it was enough for her to live in luxury for the rest of her life. Finding a quiet place, giving birth to the child and raising it well, she might find a different happiness in her life. Wasn't this the peaceful life she had always hoped for? "Miss, take care." The man who followed Yaoji out said in a deep voice. The man's deep voice sounded very pleasant, but Yaoji was a little surprised that he would say goodbye to her. She had seen this man twice around Princess Ding. He wasn't an ordinary guard and seemed to have a high status. Shouldn't such a person be very disdainful to people like her? Or was it that the people around Princess Ding were really different? Thank you. Yaoji choked. She didn't know this man's name. Thank you, sir. In front of this silent man, Yaoji found that the social skills she had learned in Qingqing Lane all these years seemed to be completely useless. She couldn't even put on a smile on her face, so she could only express her gratitude in an unembarrassed manner. The man looked at her calmly and said, I'm Qin Feng. Miss, your body isn't well. If you want to go on a long journey, you'd better wait for some time. Yaoji was stunned for a moment, then she nodded and said, Thank you for reminding me, Commander Qin. I'll take my leave. I won't see you out. Qin Feng said indifferently. Yaoji smiled faintly, then turned around and left in a natural and unrestrained manner. She naturally understood Qin Feng's reminder and concern. Her gloomy mood these days because of these things had improved a lot. If he could show some concern to a stranger he didn't know, there must be many good people in this world. After leaving Chujing, she might not be so sad. At least, from now on, she was no longer a dancer, but an ordinary person. This was actually what she had wanted all along, wasn't it? When she sold Qingqing Lane to Princess Ding used Princess Ding's power to change her household register. Since then, the music register that she had been brooding about was no longer there. She, Yaoji, was just a single mother with a child. Chapter 1131. In a courtyard on the outskirts of the Chu capital, under the faint sunlight, a beautiful but slightly thin and pale woman sat under a tree with a baby in her arms. The baby in her arms was more than 3 months old. Compared to the wrinkled appearance when he was just born, his little face was now white and tender. A pair of big watery eyes looked at the woman holding him and giggled. The woman lowered her head and looked at the baby in her arms. A faint smile appeared on her originally hesitant face. Miss Yaoji, Madam and young Madam are here. At the door, a woman who looked like a maid reported in a deep voice. Although she was a maid, she looked at the woman under the tree without the slightest respect. Instead, she was full of contempt and disgust. Yaoji had long been used to such gazes and didn't care. In the eyes of these people, she was just a shameless woman who seduced the heir of Marquis Muyang's mansion. Yaoji lowered her head as if she didn't hear her. Since she was caught in June when she was pregnant, the madam of Marquis Muyang's family took away all her belongings and she lost her freedom. When she was about to give birth, she almost died in an avalanche. Even Yaoji didn't expect that the seemingly gentle and well-educated young madam of Marquis Muyang's mansion would be so vicious. After going through so much, Yaoji became more and more bitterly disappointed. She completely despaired of these so-called rich and powerful people. The maid said she was here to report, but she didn't say she was here to inform. Seeing that Yaoji didn't speak, she didn't care and left directly. Sure enough, a group of people came in after a while. Madam of Marquis Muyang frowned and looked at the charming Yaoji in white, her eyes full of disgust. Born in a noble family, she naturally hated these enchanting women the most, not to mention that this woman had hooked her son's heart. The young madam of Marquis Muyang's mansion, who had just entered the family for a few months, was even more jealous. Yaoji's appearance could be ranked in the top 5 even in the entire capital city. In the past, when she wore a red dance dress in Qingqing Lane, she had attracted praise from all sides at the banquet in the palace. Even though she had lost a lot of weight and was dressed in white without any makeup, she was more elegant and proud like a lotus flower. How could young Madame Mu, the young lady of the Sun family, compared to her. Originally, this young Madame Mu had a scholarly and elegant temperament, which made Yi Li secretly praise her in her heart. However, after getting married, her life was filled with jealousy and viciousness. She had long abandoned her last advantage. Now, it seemed that she was just a mean and vicious young woman. How dare you? Don't you even know how to salute? The madam of the Marquis Muyang's mansion reprimanded in a deep voice. Yaoji raised her head and said indifferently, "You two didn't come in person but still asked the master to bow." Young Madame Mu shrieked, "What kind of master are you? This is Marquis Muyang's residence." Yaoji said, "It's true that I'm not the master, but neither is young Mistress Mu." This was Mu Yang's private courtyard. Obviously, Mu Yang did not recognize the young madam's right to own her own private property. "Young Madame Mu, do you still remember? When you almost starved me and Jing and to death, Mu Yang had ordered that you and Jing and were not allowed to take a step into this place. As for me, if Madame Mu is willing to let me go, Yaoji will be very grateful. I think the money you took from me should be enough to pay for these days, right?" Marquis Muyang's and young Madame Mu's faces were both green and white. Young Madame Mu was purely angry, while Marquis Muyang was more embarrassed and angry. Zhang family took away all of Yaoji's property, and a large part of it fell into her hands. Yaoji naturally made a lot of money these years. When she sold Qingqing Lane to Prince Ding Mansion, Yi Li did not take advantage of Yaoji. The price she gave was absolutely fair. In addition, Yaoji was given all kinds of treasures by many celebrities, refined scholars, princes, and dignitaries. If it was really valued, it was worth at least 300,000 to 400,000 taels of silver. Such a large sum of money, even for a noble family like Marquis Muyang's residence, it was absolutely a huge sum of money. After a long while, Marquis Muyang stood up and gritted her teeth, "If you want to leave, then leave. But you must keep the child." Although the child's mother came from a dishonorable background, he was the first grandchild of Marquis Muyang's residence. Since Sun did not make any move after Muyang got married for so long, Marquis Muyang naturally valued this child more. Moreover, the bloodline of Marquis Muyang's residence could not be left outside. Don't even think about it. Yaoji stood up with the child in her arms and stared at Marquis Muyang warily. She suddenly sneered, "If you don't want to leave, then leave. I'm not afraid of you. Even if I don't have a status here, Muyang will still provide for me with good food and luxurious clothes. If I think it through one day, it's fine for me to enter the residence as a concubine. With my beauty, do you think I'm afraid of an average-looking woman? I just don't know. If Prince Muyang married a dancer, will he be a laughingstock? You're shameless." Young Madame Mu's face suddenly changed. Yaoji was living in another courtyard now, and Muyang often refused to go home. If this mother and son were brought back to the residence, would there be a place for her in Marquis Muyang's residence? Yaoji faintly lifted her lips and smiled beautifully, "You flatter me. I'm not as good as someone." The mocking tone was so obvious that Marquis Muyang couldn't pretend not to understand it. How could Marquis Muyang, who had always been high and mighty in front of Yaoji, tolerate the mockery of a dancer? She said angrily, "You bitch. I'd like to see if I can control you or not. So what if Muyang dotes on you? I'm Muyang's mother after all." Yaoji sneered, "So what if you're Muyang's mother? Is it that rare?" If it was before when she had a strong relationship with Muyang, she might have some scruples about Muyang. But now, as early as when she was almost killed by young Madame Mu during childbirth, and when she and the child almost starved to death some time ago, she had already given up on Muyang. It was not because Muyang refused to avenge her and the child. She understood that Muyang cared about Marquis Muyang's residence and Sun family. What she hated the most was that Muyang still refused to let her go even though he knew that it was dangerous for her and the child to stay in the Chu capital. She didn't know and didn't want to know whether it was because Muyang was confident that he could protect her and the child, or because in Muyang's eyes, her and the child's lives were not that important. But now, her heart was completely cold towards Muyang. Compared to her son, their love in the past had long become a thing of the past. Guards! Drag this woman out and beat her hard. Marquis Muyang shouted. Who dares? The servants around were about to take action when Muyang quickly walked in from outside and shouted sternly. Muyang walked into the courtyard and glanced at young Madame Mu who was standing beside Marquis Muyang. He said angrily, "It's you again." Young Madame Mu lowered her head bitterly. Although it was indeed she who instigated her mother-in-law to come here, her husband's attitude of reprimanding her without even asking hurt her. It wasn't that she didn't want to be a virtuous wife, but when Yaoji went missing, Muyang went to the battlefield without saying a word. After that, Marquis Muyang's residents found Yaoji, and Muyang came back and married her. However, no matter what she did, he was always indifferent to her. She was just a newly married woman in her teens. How could she bear it? Chapter 1132. Yaoji sneered and sneered, "Is the crown prince blind? It wasn't young Madame Mu who wanted to hit me." Muyang frowned and looked at Yaoji helplessly. Yaoji, Yaoji, who was talking and laughing, suddenly changed her expression. She raised her hand and slapped Muyang hard in the face. Not only did Muyang's face turn to the side, but it also made Marchioness Muyang and young Madame Mu cry out in shock. Young bitch. You. Marchioness Muyang was furious. Muyang hurriedly stopped his mother who was about to fly into a rage. He said to Yaoji with a gloomy expression, "Are you appeased now?" Yaoji pursed her lips and smiled, but her smile was extremely cold. Appeased? You must be joking. Since you said you want to marry me, Yaoji has a question even though my life is cheap. Muyang was delighted, thinking that Yaoji had relented. He hurriedly said, "Ask away." Yaoji held the child with one hand and pointed at Matriarch Mu, asking, "If Yaoji is killed by Marchioness Muyang one day, what are you going to do?" Muyang's expression changed slightly. "Yaoji, what nonsense are you talking about? How could my mother?" Yaoji sneered and raised her eyebrows. "Why don't you ask Marchioness Muyang if she was going to kill me just now?" Muyang turned to look at Marchioness Muyang, only to see her stiffly turn her face away. His heart couldn't help but sink. Yaoji smiled brilliantly. "It's fine if you want to marry me as a concubine. Based on your sincerity, Yaoji will use my life to stop you. As long as you swear in front of everyone in the capital that if Yaoji dies an unnatural death one day, you will personally kill her in front of her coffin, and she will still be my subordinate. How about it?" Young Marchioness Muyang and young Madame Mu both tried to stop him. Looking at their ugly expressions, Yaoji smiled mockingly and turned to enter the room with the child, ignoring how noisy Marchioness Muyang and young Madame Mu were outside. When Muyang finally saw his mother and wife off, he returned to his room and saw Yaoji standing in front of the window, thinking about something. A trace of guilt flashed through Muyang's eyes as he sighed in a low voice. "Yaoji, why are you doing this? Why would you say something like that? I know, you're not that kind of person." Yaoji sneered. "You're wrong. I'm that kind of person. If I don't live well, then no one will. If anything happens to me, I won't count on you to avenge me." I gave 50,000 taels of silver to the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce. If anything happens to me, the people of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce will naturally avenge me. I don't believe it. Muyang shook his head and smiled. Yaoji remained silent. Muyang hugged her waist from behind and whispered, "Yaoji, you can live here from now on. Don't worry, from now on, Marquis Muyang's men will never come again. No one will disturb us. Let's live a good life. More than a year ago, when Muyang hugged her like this, she still felt warm and tender. But now, she felt as if a cold and wet snake had wrapped itself around her. From the outside to the inside, the coldness seeped into his heart. Sure enough, no one disturbed them for 2 whole months. In these 2 months, Yaoji didn't resist Muyang, nor did she make a fuss about leaving. Gradually, Muyang seemed to be relieved, and he came less often than before. After all, Muyang was a young and promising man. It was impossible for him to spend all his time on a woman. When Yaoji knew that Muyang wouldn't come for some time because of Mo Jingqi's order, she knew her chance had come. The servants in the courtyard didn't respect Yaoji. Seeing that she didn't intend to run away, they gradually relaxed their vigilance. Finally, Yaoji took the child and escaped from the courtyard one night when the lanterns were lit. After escaping from the courtyard, Yaoji only took some cheap but valuable jewelry. And she immediately exchanged these jewelry for silver notes. She didn't know when Muyang found out that she was missing, but no one chased after her for a few days before she escaped. Yaoji ran day and night all the way to the west, but unfortunately, she was still caught by the people of Marquis Muyang's mansion 10 days later. It wasn't easy for a lone woman to run around with a child. On the 15th day, Yaoji finally saw the people who chased after her. But they were different from the people who looked for her everywhere 2 days ago. These people wanted to kill her. Just when Yaoji was almost desperate, several carriages appeared at the edge of the woods. Without thinking too much, Yaoji ran towards the carriages with the child in her arms. While running, she shouted, "Help! Help!" In the front, a man in gray was stunned for a moment, and then he quickly jumped up. The people who chased after her were not professional assassins, nor were they masters. Naturally, they were easily killed. Yaoji sat on the ground with the child in her arms. For a moment, she didn't come to her senses. Was she safe? "Miss Yaoji, are you all right?" A deep male voice sounded in front of her. Yaoji looked up in a daze. A tall man with a calm expression stood in front of her. Yaoji was stunned, saying, You are Commander Qin." "Qin Feng." Qin Feng said lightly. He was ordered to go to the capital of Chu to find the princess's 2 wet nurses and 2 maids. But he didn't expect to meet Yaoji, who was being chased. Frowning, Qin Feng asked, "Who is chasing after you?" Yaoji said with waning interest, "Probably people from the house of Marquis Muyang." She had just escaped from danger. These days of hiding and hurrying on the road had already exhausted her both mentally and physically. Now that she suddenly relaxed, she didn't have the mood to care about these things. Qin Feng looked down at the child in her arms. He didn't cry when Yaoji was running with him. "This is your child." Yaoji nodded and smiled, saying, "Yes, this is my son." "Shen Jin gone." Qin Feng raised his eyebrows. He didn't ask why the child's surname wasn't Mu. He looked down at Yaoji and said, "Miss, what are your plans?" Yaoji said embarrassedly, "I plan to go west." Qin Feng thought for a moment and said, "We are going back to Glass City." "Miss, you can come with us." Yaoji was delighted. She originally planned to go to the Prince Ding mansion. She didn't have to go to Glass City. But people from the house of Marquis Muyang would be more restrained after entering Feihong Pass. But the journey to Glass City was long. It would be best if she could travel with them. Thinking of this, Yaoji didn't refuse. She nodded and said, "Then, thank you, Commander Qin." Qin Feng shook his head silently. He looked at Yaoji's sallow and emaciated appearance and didn't say anything more. He only said, "It's nothing. No need to be so polite." Chapter 1133. Yaoji lived in Glass City. After careful consideration, she finally asked Princess Ding to find a good family for the child. When she was in Marquis Muyang's mansion, she would rather die than give up the child, because she knew that the child would not have a good life if left alone in Marquis Muyang's mansion. No matter how much Mu Yang loved the child, there would be times when he did not take good care of the child. One negligence was enough to kill the child. Now that she had settled down, Yaoji had more time to think about it. It was not good for the child to follow Mu Yang, but it was not necessarily a good thing to have a mother like her. Moreover, it was not difficult for her to raise a child alone, but it was not so easy to make a good relationship with a child and let a boy grow up happily. Boys would always need a father. Moreover, Yaoji always had a hunch that the matter of Marquis Muyang's mansion was not over yet. Princess Ding did find a good family for the child, a couple over 40 without children. They came from a scholarly family. Although they were not rich, they had some assets. Yaoji secretly went to see them several times. The couple really treated the child as their own. Seeing her son growing up in a healthy and comfortable family, Yaoji smiled faintly. But in her heart, she was really happy and calm. 3 months later, Yaoji opened a restaurant in the city. The money to open the restaurant was borrowed from Princess Ding. In the end, Princess Ding only gave her half of the money, and the remaining half was the shares of Prince Ding Mansion. Yaoji had no objection to this. Not to mention that she could not repay the kindness of Prince Ding Mansion in this life. She opened a restaurant in the territory of Prince Ding Mansion. What could be more stable than the Prince Ding Mansion itself? Yaoji had several years of experience in running Qingqing Lane. Although opening a restaurant was completely different from opening a musical house, at least it proved that Yaoji could handle the situation in dealing with people and receiving guests. As expected, it did not take long for the restaurant to gain a foothold in the city. Gradually, Yaoji did not need to show up in public and really retired behind the scenes. Yaoji did not know how she became familiar with Qin Feng. He only remembered that when the restaurant had just opened, Qin Feng often came back to support it. He didn't do anything. He just ordered a pot of wine and 2 side dishes. Sometimes, he would sit there for 2 to 4 hours. Because of his presence, even though she was an outsider who had just opened a new restaurant, many of the city's hedonistic sons and their peers did not dare to cause trouble in the restaurant. After all, everyone in Ruyang City knew that Qin Feng was Princess Ding's personal guard. After a long time, the two of them would naturally chat for a while, and naturally became more familiar with each other. By the time Yaoji realized what was going on, Qin Feng threw the purple jade hairpin into her hand with a cold expression, pretending to be indifferent but not allowing her to refuse. She immediately panicked. Then, almost without hesitation, she asked Princess Ding to go to the capital to assist Leng Haoyu. After a long time, when she had calmed down, she suddenly realized that at that time, she actually felt that facing Qin Feng was even more difficult than facing Mu Yang again, and that she might even end up fighting with him. That was why she chose to escape to the capital. Princess Ding did not agree to her request at that time, and Qin Feng came to her door that night. Yaoji was not surprised by Qin Feng's arrival. With Qin Feng's status in the Prince Ding mansion and Princess Ding's trust in him, it was impossible for him not to know this kind of thing. If it's because of me that makes you embarrassed, then I can take it back. Looking at the woman in light purple in front of him, Qin Feng said in a deep voice. His calm eyes fell on the purple in Yaoji's hair bun. Yaoji was stunned and shook her head lightly. No, not all. She was not lying, at least in her heart at that moment. Yaoji was very clear that Prince Ding and Princess Ding were different. Princess Ding herself might not agree with her going to the capital, but Prince Ding must let her go. In the past few years, she had several contacts with Prince Ding. As a woman, she could only envy Prince Ding's feelings for the princess. But Prince Ding's means to those who had hurt Princess Ding or intended to hurt her were chilling. Yaoji also knew that when Princess Ding almost fell off the cliff and died, the person who led the army at that time was Marquis Muyang. Every time she saw Prince Ding's thoughtful look, Yaoji knew that Prince Ding did not forget this matter. Although Prince Ding did not say it himself, Yaoji had already understood what he meant. If she wanted to live peacefully and leisurely, she must deal with Marquis Muyang's mansion by herself. She could not deal with it more neatly than others, but she and her child could obviously make Marquis Muyang's mansion and Muyang suffer more. Yaoji was not a kind person. She did not feel unwilling or angry about this, just like she would not feel guilty or sad even if Marquis Muyang's mansion was destroyed because of her. This world was a survival of the fittest. When she was no match for young Madame Mu, she could only lie in the courtyard with her child and wait for Muyang to save her or wait for death. When Princess Ding did not have enough troops, she could only gamble with her life by jumping off the cliff. Therefore, when Marquis Muyang's mansion provoked Prince Ding and was unable to fight back, only destruction awaited them. She wanted to give her child a peaceful life. What did other people's lives have to do with her? Qin Feng was silent and did not persuade her anymore. He just said, "Come back alive. Don't forget, you have a child. I will wait for you." Seeing that Yaoji wanted to say something, Qin Feng calmly added, "I will wait for you to come back before making a decision." Yaoji shook her head and gritted her teeth. "I know you are very good to me. I don't know how many years I will be gone. You are not young anymore, you should have." Qin Feng looked out of the window and said lightly, "It's your business how to decide. It's my business whether to wait or not. The princess ordered me to escort you to the capital. You should rest early. We will leave tomorrow morning." After that, Qin Feng did not give Yaoji a chance to refuse. He turned and walked out of the door. Looking at the straight back of the person who had walked out of the door, Yaoji smiled bitterly in her heart. "Yaoji, you really should have just refused him directly." In the blink of an eye, several years had passed. Emperor Chu Mo Jingqi, who had spent his life trying to suppress the Prince Ding mansion, had passed away. The northern tribes and the northern territory invaded. The Dechu state, which had lost the Prince Ding mansion, was powerless to resist and went south to Jiangnan. The Prince Ding mansion protected the country and the southern Chu regent Imo Jingli joined forces with the northern tribes in Xiling to deal with the Prince Ding mansion. And the Marquis Muyang's mansion was also finished. When she saw Muyang reluctantly close his eyes in front of her, Yaoji did not feel any joy or satisfaction from revenge. She did not even feel any sorrow. Her heart was only silent and desolate. The war was still going on. Yaoji returned to Glass City with a desolate state of mind and her adopted son, Qin Lai, who had accompanied her for several years. She still lived the same peaceful life as before. She only occasionally secretly went to see her son who had already entered a private school. Only then did she feel a faint sense of comfort. Although she did not pay attention to worldly affairs, Yaoji still heard about the war on the front line from time to time. Every day, Yaoji sat at the table in the wing room that Qin Feng usually sat at in the restaurant. She listened to the people who walked by and talked loudly. Chapter 1134. Even though the Mahist army went through many twists and turns, they still defeated all the enemies in the end and returned victorious. "Mother! Mother, let's go!" Qin Lai rushed in, grabbed Yaoji and was about to rush out. Yaoji hurriedly pulled him back and said helplessly, "What's the rush?" Qin Lai rolled his eyes and said, "Father is back, let's go welcome him." Originally, Qin Lai had always called her godmother and Qin Feng godfather. But after returning to Glass City, Yaoji suddenly found that Qin Lai, who was usually calm, had become much more lively. And the way he called her and Qin Feng had become father and mother, which would cause people to misunderstand. But he still didn't change. Yaoji pulled his hand away and sighed softly. Today is the day of the Mahist army's victorious return. There are so many people, why should we go? Qin Lai pouted unhappily and said, "What do you mean by joining in? What's wrong with going to welcome Father's victorious return? Father will be very happy when he sees us." Yaoji shook her head and said, "You go, I won't go. Just say congratulations to Qin Commander for me." Qin Lai's little face instantly drooped. It seemed that his mother still wasn't willing to accept his father. Qin Lai felt that his godfather was the most devoted man in the world. Who in the world could chase a girl for 7 or 8 years? Why didn't his mother like him? Then he thought about the things that his mother often secretly took out to look at in the Chu capital and Jiangnan. It didn't seem like she didn't like them. Could it be that his mother had some concerns? "Since you're not going, I won't go either." Qin Lai sat dejectedly at the table across from Yaoji, looking at her with eager eyes. Yaoji helplessly raised her hand and patted his head, saying, "What are you doing, you little brat? It's not like you don't know my identity. If I run out, won't I just embarrass Commander Qin? And you, if you dare to shout outside in the future, do you believe that I'll beat you?" "I don't believe." Qin Lai said with a smile, "Godfather said that I might be his only son in his life. I still have to take care of him when he's old, of course I have to call him father. And you, godmother, it feels so distant." "Right, mother." Yaoji felt powerless. She waved her hand and said, "Anyway, go and welcome your adoptive father." "I'm not feeling well, so I won't be going." "Not feeling well?" Qin Lai looked at her in confusion. "Yes. Go quickly." "I really can't go." Qin Lai nodded seriously and said, "I understand. Mother, I'll be leaving first." Outside the door, Qin Lai looked back at Yaoji, who was sitting at the table in a daze, and said to himself, "Does she mean that she wants father to visit her in person?" In the courtyard behind the restaurant, Yaoji was sitting alone under a tree, playing the zither. The sound of the zither, which was supposed to be beautiful and smooth, was intermittent and unclear. The mind of the person under the tree was obviously not on the strings of the zither. She was absent-minded as she plucked the strings. A series of steady footsteps came from the gate of the courtyard. Yaoji was stunned and looked back, only to see Qin Feng in black standing not far away and looking at her calmly. For some reason, Yaoji felt a little guilty. Qin Feng walked up and looked down at her. After a long time, he asked, "Why don't you come out of the city?" Yaoji stood up in a panic and said, I have to look after the restaurant." In fact, almost all the people in the city went out to welcome the returning Mahist army. Even though Yaoji's restaurant was one of the best in Glass City, there was no business this morning. "You're lying." Qin Feng stared at her and said indifferently. He was the leader of Qilin. If he couldn't even tell if someone was lying or not, he wouldn't be able to survive. Yaoji was a little upset. She clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, "Fine, I'll say. I don't think we're suitable. Let's meet less in the future. I'll give it back to you." Yaoji reached out to Qin Feng, holding the purple jade hairpin in her hand. Qin Feng didn't get angry. Even his expression didn't change in the slightest. He said indifferently, "It's too late." Yaoji was surprised. "What's too late?" Qin Feng said, "A few years ago, before you went to the capital, you didn't give it back to me. I'll take it as a yes." I. Miss Yaoji had always been good at dancing. Her dance in Qingqing Lane was enough to topple a city and stun the capital. Even in Jiangnan, she could still play with officials and noblewomen in southern Chu and the entire Marquis Muyang's mansion. But in front of this silent and calm man, she couldn't even say a word clearly. After a while, she clenched her teeth and said, "I said, it's impossible between us. What's your status and what's my status? If you really marry me, you'll only be laughed at by the world. Who dares to laugh at me?" Qin Feng didn't care. There weren't many people in the world who dared to laugh at him. He was the leader of the most elite Qilin in the Prince Ding mansion and Princess Ding's most trusted confidant. Now that the world had just settled down, everyone knew that he must have a promising future. Gossip is a fearful thing. You should go. These years, if it's my fault. Yaoji lowered her head and said. She didn't know when she had placed this man in her heart. Perhaps it was when he silently accompanied her day after day in the restaurant back then. Perhaps it was when he calmly comforted her in Jiangnan. Perhaps it was when he didn't want to make things difficult for her and was willing to let her hate him to personally get rid of Mu Yang for him. Perhaps it was now. Even though she was moved by his feelings, she didn't want to hinder his future and make him a laughingstock. Qin Feng nodded and said, "It's good that you know you're wrong. If you know you're wrong, you should change. Come with me." Qin Feng pulled Yaoji out of the courtyard. Yaoji's strength was naturally no match for Qin Feng's, even though Qin Feng didn't use too much strength. Where are we going?" "Prince Ding Mansion. I'm asking the prince and princess to grant a marriage," Qin Feng replied indifferently. "In the Prince Ding Mansion." Yili calmly looked at the two people in front of her and asked, "Have you thought it through?" "No," Yaoji said anxiously. She didn't expect that Qin Feng would really pull her to Princess Ding. Before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Qin Feng, replying to Wang Fei, "This subordinate has thought it through. Please grant my wish." People were distant from each other. Compared with Yaoji, Yili obviously cared more about Qin Feng's opinion. She just smiled and said, "But I think Yaoji didn't agree." "Qin Feng, do you know what the punishment is for forcing a woman from a good family? The heaviest punishment is 100 and banishment for 3,000 miles. Yili smiled and nodded with satisfaction. "You're my confidant, so you don't have to be banished. But, if a prince breaks the law, he'll be punished with 300 beatings. Are you lucky?" "Yes, please grant my wish, princess." Yili was immediately amused. She looked at Qin Feng with a smile and said, "Do you think I'll marry Yaoji to you if you can endure 300 beatings?" Mo Xiaoyao, who had been watching the show, suddenly said, "Li, if Qin Feng can really endure 300 beatings, it means he's not destined to die. You can give him face. Yaoji, don't worry. After all, you're the hero of the Prince Ding Mansion. I won't push you into the fire pit. After Qin Feng suffers 300 beatings, I promise he won't be able to get up for the rest of his life. In the future, you can do whatever you want, right?" Yaoji couldn't come to her senses. She really didn't understand what was going on. Why did she suddenly have to beat Qin Feng? Seeing that Princess Ding was about to call someone to drag Qin Feng out for punishment, Yaoji hurriedly cried, "No. No, Princess, Qin Feng didn't force Yaoji." Yili raised her eyebrows. "Oh. Then who didn't you just say what?" Yaoji was speechless. She looked at Prince Ding, who was in high spirits. It seemed that as long as she said one wrong word, he would immediately pull Qin Feng and beat him severely. Yaoji said carefully, I mean, you don't have to bother me with this kind of thing." Yili smiled faintly. "What kind of trouble is this? You don't have a family, and Qin Feng is also alone. Naturally, your marriage will be arranged by the Prince Ding Mansion. Qin Feng, go back and tell Director Mo, just arrange it according to the standard of a general. As the commander of Qilin, Qin Feng's position was equal to that of a general who led an army. In addition, Yaoji is the hero of the Prince Ding Mansion and the manager of the intelligence in the south. She has worked hard these years. Let's arrange the dowry according to the rank of a county princess. The wedding will be held in the Prince Ding Mansion in August this year. What do you think? Thank you, Princess. Everything will be decided by you. Qin Feng agreed without hesitation. When she came out of the Prince Ding Mansion, Yaoji was still a little dizzy. She forgot to care that she and Qin Feng walking together in the daytime would cause gossip. Qin Feng looked at her with a smile and said, now that the marriage has been decided, you should just stay at home and wait to get married. You. Yaoji's expression was complicated. She was not young anymore. Women over 30 years old no longer dreamed of wearing a red wedding dress and getting married like ordinary women. But the man in front of her gave her everything she dreamed of. From his eyes, she could see that he really didn't care about the possible rumors and ridicule. If there was a man in the world who could take care of her like this, why would she refuse the happiness that was about to come to her? You don't want to run away from the marriage, do you? Qin Feng frowned. No, I don't. I'll wait for you. Yaoji calmed herself down and said in a deep voice. Qin Feng's expression softened, and he said with a smile, okay, I'll take you back first. Qin Feng, do you know my name? Of course I do. The tall man held the woman's slender hand, and while walking, he said with a faint smile, is it your surname Shin? Shin Yao. Yes, my name is Shin Yao. She was Shin Yao, no longer Yaoji. Qin Feng Shin Yao. Chapter 1135. Beat him to death. Beat him to death. On a deserted street, a group of gorgeously dressed children were beating and kicking a thin and weak child in embroidered clothes. These children were the most cruel. They didn't understand the calculations and disputes of adults, but they used their own methods to directly and violently solve the problem. The child being beaten was also dressed in embroidered clothes, but his entire body was thin and weak, like a lonely puppy. His small face was already faintly discernible of his future handsome and extraordinary appearance. Perhaps it was this appearance that caused him to be hated and bullied by children of the same age. As expected of the son of a vixen, born with such a disgusting appearance. An 11 or 12-year-old youth in embroidered clothes stood to the side, proudly scolding. The boy fiercely opened his eyes, fiercely glaring at the elder brother who was standing to the side and ordering people to beat him. Startled by his ferocious gaze, the youth unconsciously took a step back. When he finally reacted, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Teach him a good lesson for this young master. Someone's coming. It was unknown who shouted, but the children who were still beating and kicking immediately scattered like birds and beasts. The youth in embroidered clothes unwillingly glanced at the child on the ground, then followed after them. The street suddenly quieted down, and the beaten child curled himself into a small ball, tightly hugging his knees and softly sobbing. Don't cry, they're gone. A soft and gentle voice filled with kindness sounded, and the boy couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He raised his head and saw an extremely beautiful young girl in embroidered clothes standing in front of him at some unknown time. The young girl was only 12 or 13 years old, and even though he had seen many beautiful girls, the boy still felt that the elder sister in front of him was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She wore a light yellow robe with cloud patterns, and the sleeves and hem of her robe were embroidered with rose-red phoenix tail lace, and she also wore a light red phoenix tail embroidered scarf. A green gem hung by her slender neck, and her hair was casually tied up in a simple bun with a hibiscus hairpin, and there was also an unshaken hairpin. When she lowered her head to look at him, the light golden jade hanging from the bouillon swayed gently, and the little child couldn't help but be stunned. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" Seeing that he didn't speak, the young girl squatted down worriedly. "No." The boy shook his head and whispered. Although those people beat him, they didn't really dare to beat him to death, so he didn't get hurt, but it was very painful. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to death over the years. "It's good that you're not injured. I'll get someone to send you back." "Who are those people? Why did they hit you?" The girl looked at the boy's dusty face and took out a handkerchief to carefully wipe him clean. Only then did she realize that the boy was actually very good-looking. "It's none of your business." The boy was stunned. He raised his hand and slapped the girl's hand away. Seeing the girl's startled expression, the boy bit his lips in annoyance. However, he stubbornly refused to speak and turned his head away. The girl was also a descendant of a prestigious family. Although she was young, she had seen many things. Looking at the child's appearance, he could roughly guess what was going on. This child was unwilling to go home. He was afraid that she had been wronged at home. Those people just now could be this child's family. "All right, let's not go home yet. What's your name?" The girl pulled the boy up and asked with a smile. "Feng. Feng Xiao." "You." The boy hesitated, but in the end, he didn't ask. The girl's name couldn't be casually asked. Although Feng Xiao was a concubine's son, he had learned everything he needed to learn. "Feng Xiao. You're a child of the capital's Feng family. You can just call me Big Sister Hua." The girl smiled. The noble ladies in the capital all had their own circles. When a large group of girls gathered together, they naturally couldn't help but gossip. The Feng family was considered a famous family in the capital. The girl naturally heard of the Feng family's affairs. You won't look down on me?" Feng Xiao stared at the girl in front of him and asked in confusion. The girl smiled sweetly and said in confusion, "Look down on you? Why? You're so young, only 7 or 8 years old. Why would I look down on you? I'm a concubine's son." Feng Xiao clenched his teeth. After hesitating, he fiercely added, "I'm not young. I'm already 9 years old." 9 years old? You don't look like it. The girl said, "Whether you're a concubine's son or not isn't something you can choose. In the future, if you work hard, others won't look down on you. However, if you grow up and learn from those hedonistic sons of rich parents, I will naturally look down on you. I'll be 9 years old soon." Feng Xiao said. "Don't tell me I don't want to learn well." It was clearly Auntie who said a concubine's son didn't need to learn so much. The girl smiled as she looked at the indignant child in front of her. Suddenly, she pursed her lips and smiled. "If you really want to improve yourself, I'll take you to a good place to play." Feng Xiao looked suspiciously at the girl in front of him. The girl comforted him by patting his head and smiling, "Don't be afraid. Big Sister isn't a bad person." When the soft jade hand touched his dusty head, Feng Xiao felt in his heart that even if this sister was a bad person, he was willing to go with her. It was better than going home to face his auntie and 2 older brothers. Miss, you're..." Holding Feng Xiao's hand, they walked to the intersection. There was a carriage parked at the intersection. In front of the carriage stood several bodyguard-like men, a middle-aged woman, and several servant girls. Seeing the 2 of them, the middle-aged woman hurriedly greeted them with a frown and a hint of anger. She had just seen a group of children ganging up on a child. Originally, they had planned to scare them away. Who would have thought that the miss would insist on taking a look at the boy and even bring him back? Looking at the dirty boy in front of her, the middle-aged woman's brows immediately furrowed. "Wet nurse." The the girl called out in a low voice. Patting Feng Xiao's hand comfortingly, she smiled at the wet nurse and said, "This child is very obedient. Take him to be a companion for Ah Yao." My miss." The wet nurse immediately cried out, "Miss, we don't even know where this boy came from. How can he be a companion for that young master? If something happens..." Their Hua family was considered to be of noble status in the capital, but compared to the Prince Ding mansion, it was nothing. Not just anyone had the qualifications to be a playmate for the young master of the Prince Ding mansion. "It's fine. Xiao is a good child." The girl smiled and said, "Get in the carriage. This has the same name as the second young master." The wet nurse was stunned and carefully sized up Feng Xiao. Only then did she realize that this child was very good-looking. It was just that he was a bit thin. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't lose to the second young master of the Prince Ding mansion. "Fine, but this child has to be obedient. Don't anger the nobles and implicate our miss." The wet nurse nodded and instructed. She wasn't a cold-hearted person. This child was so young and was being ganged up on by a group of children. It was quite pitiful. However, as the eldest Mrs. Wet Nurse, she naturally had to pay attention to everything. Chapter 1136. On this day, for the first time, Feng Xiao met a person who would have a great impact on his future life. It was the second son of King Ding's mansion, Mo Xiuyao. As the illegitimate son of a merchant family, to be able to meet the legitimate son of the high and mighty Prince Ding of Great Chu, it could be said to be a matter of 3 lifetimes of fortune. But, for Feng Xiao, what he thought at that time was, he really wanted to kick him to death. As soon as he entered the magnificent gate of King Ding's mansion, a strong wind came to his face. Feng Xiao was stunned. After all, he was only a child less than 9 years old. Even if he found the hidden weapon, he couldn't avoid it. However, he didn't think that the hidden weapon flying towards his face was just an illusion. A stone flew past his scalp, but he only felt something flying over his head. There wasn't even a trace of pain. "Sister Yunxi, why are you here?" On a rockery in front, an 8 or 9-year-old boy in white sat on it swaggeringly. He looked at the well-dressed girl with a smile and didn't even look at Feng Xiao. But Feng Xiao didn't care. He just noticed one thing. So, her name was Yunxi. Hua Yunxi. "Yao, are you being naughty again? I'll complain to first young master and let him punish you." Hua Yunxi laughed crisply. The child on the rockery somersaulted in the air and landed steadily in front of them. A child less than 10 years old, but his lightness skill was not inferior to the first-class masters in Jianghu. Mo Xiuyao curled his lips and said, "Sister Hua, you always use my elder brother to suppress me." But second young master Mo was not afraid of anything, but he obeyed his elder brother who raised him since he was a child. Hua Yunxi covered her mouth and snickered. Who asked him to be afraid of Prince Ding and the heir? "Sister Hua, are you here for me?" Mo Xiuyao said with a smile. Hua Yunxi nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, I'm going out of the city to pray for blessings and visit Great Elder Princess. Last time, Great Elder Princess nagged me to take you there next time. Pack up and let's go." Mo Xiuyao let out an anguished cry as he stared at Hua Yunxi. Hua Yunxi raised an eyebrow and smiled, ignoring his pitiful appearance. Mo Xiuyao could only grumble in his heart. Every time Great Elder Princess saw him, she liked to pinch and rub him. This young master isn't a doe. Only then did second young master Mo's gaze fall upon the gloomy Feng Xiao standing to the side. He asked, "Who is this brat? He's so silly." Hua Yunxi glared at him helplessly, then said, "His name is Feng Xiao. He's a good kid. I'll tell the crown prince to let him learn martial arts with you in the future. You're about the same age, so you'll have a companion. Second young master Mo rolled his eyes. He looks so silly, can he keep up with his studies? Hearing someone's arrogant tone, Feng Zhiyao silently lowered his head and stared at his fist. Even when he was bullied by his two half-brothers every day these years, he didn't feel that his fist was so strong. Hey, hey. Silly boy, you don't want to beat me, do you? Even 10 of you can't beat one of me, do you know? Second young master Mo couldn't be the most arrogant, so he would only be more arrogant. Mo, Xiao, Yao. Hua Yunqi shouted angrily. Seeing Hua Yunqi's raised hand, second young master Mo immediately fled, and didn't forget to complain, Sister Hua, I'm your younger brother. Who on earth is this brat? Why are you so nice to him? Feng Zhiyao snorted coldly, raised his small face, and turned to go out. Hua Yunqi was stunned, hurriedly pulled him and said, Where are you going? Feng Zhiyao said coldly, You don't need to beg him. I don't want to learn martial arts with him. Isn't he just the second young master of the Prince Ding mansion? I don't want to. Hua Yunqi was both angry and amused. She grabbed the child who was about to leave with one hand, and glared at Mo Xiaoyao who was making a face at the side. She laughed and said, Yao just likes to mess around, he doesn't have any bad intentions. Feng Zhiyao snorted disdainfully. They had just met, and he was already hitting people with stones, and his eyes were growing on top of his head. How could he be a good person? I'm going back. Thank you for saving me today. Feng Zhiyao tried his best to express his thanks like an adult, but his current sorry state was really lacking in persuasion. Seeing that he was about to leave, Mo Xiaoyao didn't want to. He blocked his path with a smile and asked, What are you going back for? To continue getting beaten? Although he was young, he was extremely intelligent. How could he not know why Feng Zhiyao was in such a mess? And why did Hua Yunqi bring him to the Prince Ding mansion? Who cares what you do? Feng Zhiyao's face immediately turned red with anger, as if his embarrassment had been seen through. Mo Xiaoyao raised his hand and pulled on his cheek. All right, for Sister Hua's sake, in the future, you can practice martial arts with this young master. Who wants to practice with you? Seeing that Feng Zhiyao was about to refuse, Mo Xiaoyao quickly moved in front of him and said in a low voice, This young master guarantees that you'll only need 3 days to beat those people who bullied you to the ground. Feng Zhiyao was silent. It wasn't that he had a good impression of this annoying person in front of him, but that beating those people who bullied him to the ground was really a very tempting suggestion. What are your conditions? Feng Zhiyao asked. In this world, there was no such thing as a free lunch. Perhaps, except for her conditions. Mo Xiaoyao didn't seem to expect that he would say such a thing. After thinking for a while, he touched his chin and pretended to be mature. From now on, if I tell you to go east, you can't go west. If I tell you to jump into rivers, you can't climb mountains. If I tell you to chase cats, you can't play with dogs. In short, you'll listen to everything I say. Mo Xiaoyao. Go to hell. Young Master Feng San spat out coldly. Listen to everything he said. If he told him to die, he would do it. Did he think he was a fool? I hate gigolos like you the most. Since you came, Sister Hua doesn't love me anymore. Second young Master Mo was a little hurt. Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes. Do you think you're so evil? Xiaoyao, get along well with Zhiyao. I won't visit Great Elder Princess today. Hua Yunqi said with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao's little face lit up. He raised his hand and patted Feng Zhiyao's shoulder with a smile. The person Sister Hua brings is my good friend and brother. Sister Hua, don't worry. We'll get along well. I'll take good care of Brother Zhiyao. He's the same age as you. Hua Yunqi emphasized helplessly. I don't care. Feng Zhiyao, right? Come, this young master will take you to the study for class. The teacher will definitely go crazy. Mo Xiuyao waved his hand at Hua Yunqi, then grabbed Feng Zhiyao's collar and ran off. Being dragged along, Feng Zhiyao looked back absent-mindedly and saw the beautiful girl still standing behind him and looking at them with a smile. The faint sunlight shone on her, as if she had a halo of 7 colors. Bang! Feng Zhiyao, who was absent-minded, tripped and fell to the ground, prostrating himself on the ground. Feng Zhiyao's eyebrows twitched. Mo Xiuyao, damn you. Chapter 1137. In the 3rd month of the Chu capital, hundreds of flowers were blooming. The spring scenery was intoxicating. On the outskirts of the capital, by the shore of Beauty Lake, groups of 2 or 3 young ladies were strolling along the grassy shore, either admiring the flowers or joking around. This made Beauty Lake, which had been quiet for an entire winter, even brighter and more moving. 3 fast horses were galloping from the distance. The one at the front was a black steed. There was not a single strand of hair on its body. At a glance, it was a rare steed. What caught everyone's attention was the youth on the horse. He was dressed in white, had black hair, and was handsome. His handsome face was full of confidence and arrogance. Even though the 2 people behind him were also very outstanding, everyone's eyes involuntarily fell on the white-clothed young man. The young ladies couldn't help but cover their faces in embarrassment, but some couldn't help but want to peek. The young masters only took one look and felt like their eyes were about to be burned by this youth's radiance. Yao, can you not be so arrogant? Mo Jingli's gaze is about to throw knives at you. The 3 steeds stopped by the peach forest not far from the lake. Feng Zhiyao, dressed in red brocade, fell off the back of the horse and glanced at Mo Xiuyao. Although he was not yet 13, he had been practicing martial arts with Mo Xiuyao for the past few years. His body had quickly grown. At first, he looked like he was 7 or 8 years old. Now, he was about the same height as Mo Xiuyao. The second young master of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiuyao, was 13 years old and had just returned from a victorious battle at the border. He was in high spirits. The tempering on the battlefield made him sharper than other youths of his age. Mo Xiuyao raised his brows and said, "When did he not throw knives at me when he saw me?" Glancing at the person not far away who was gnashing his teeth and glaring at them, Mo Xiuyao said carelessly, "Speaking of which, what is it this time?" Feng Zhiyao rolled his eyes. "Second young master Mo, have you forgotten that the day before you left, you accidentally kicked someone into the Golden Water River?" There's such a thing. Mo Xiuyao was at a loss. This young master has been away for half a year, and he's holding a grudge for so long over such a small matter. Do you have too much time on your hands? Being thrown into the river was not a big deal. Young Master Feng San thought to himself. But the bad thing was that after second young Master Mo kicked him down, he didn't even think of pulling him up to apologize. Instead, when he finally managed to get up, second young Master Mo brushed past him and stepped on him again. That day, there was not a single person who did not shed tears for His Highness King Li. The water of the Golden Water River did not taste good, but His Highness Prince Li drank his fill. I heard that he was bedridden for more than half a month after he returned. By the time he got up and went to the palace to complain, Mo Xiuyao had already left with the army. He was the one who attacked me first, okay? Second young Master Mo clearly remembered what he had done. He rubbed his nose and said, "Moreover, at that time, didn't eldest brother send someone to ask me to return immediately, so, you were in a hurry, so you stepped on his head?" Feng Zhiyao glanced at a certain person who was glaring at them from not far away. To provoke a plague like Mo Xiuyao, he wondered what kind of immortal Mo Jingli had offended in his past life. The scenery of the Chu capital is really not bad. The white-clothed youth who had been silently listening to their conversation praised with a smile. Mo Xiuyao smiled and said, "Of course. Although the capital is not as hazy as Jiangnan's little bridge over flowing water, it still has its own flavor." Han Mingyue, what do you think? Are you planning to stay in the capital for a long time? The white-clothed youth shook his head and said, "I can't stay for a long time. Mingxi is still in Jiangnan, so I'm worried. However, I will probably come to the capital often in the future." Feng Zhiyao looked at the white-clothed youth and said happily, "That's good. I've heard that Mingyue is extremely intelligent. In the future, I'll leave this fellow to you." When he said this, Feng Zhiyao seemed to be gnashing his teeth. The first time they met, Mo Xiuyao had thought he was stupid. But before he met Mo Xiuyao, Feng Zhiyao had never thought of himself as stupid. If he was stupid, he wouldn't have been as knowledgeable as other children his age, even though his aunt wouldn't allow him to attend school. But ever since he met Mo Xiuyao, Feng Zhiyao seriously considered whether or not he was really stupid. For the same book, he needed 10 days to memorize, but Mo Xiuyao only needed 1 day to finish writing. For the same sword style, he needed 3 days to learn, but Mo Xiuyao only needed to read it once. In the end, even the teacher who taught them sympathized with young Master Feng San, who couldn't keep up at all, and gave him a special lesson. But Han Mingyue was different. Although Han Mingyue had lived in Jiangnan for a long time, she was only 14 years old. Young Master Mingyue, on the other hand, was already famous throughout Jiangnan. He and Mo Xiuyao could be said to have gotten to know each other through an exchange of blows. In the end, they got to know each other because they admired each other's abilities. Feng Zhiyao felt that his life would be much better with such a monstrous genius by his side. Han Mingyue smiled and shook her head, "I'm not a genius. If we're talking about geniuses, who can compare to young Master Su of the Su family?" The young master of the Su family, Su Qingchen, was a few years younger than them, but he was already famous throughout the world. All the scholars who had seen him were full of praise and called him a peerless genius. Mo Xiuyao casually tied the horse to a tree and walked into the peach forest. Su Qingchen studies literature. He's not on the same path as us. Moreover, the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family couldn't get too close. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for anyone. In the peach forest, the sound of zither music could be heard from a distance. There were also many young girls singing and laughing. At this time, it was the time for scholars and beautiful girls to go out for a walk. Sister Hua. On an empty patch of grass in the peach forest, a group of young girls dressed in luxurious clothes sat on the ground. Some were playing zither, while others were chatting and laughing. Sitting in the center was a young girl dressed in purple. She was the daughter of the Duke of Hua, Hua Yunxi. Seeing the three of them, the young girls couldn't help but blush. They hurriedly stood up and greeted them. The second young master of the Prince Ding mansion was of noble status. He was handsome and, more importantly, he was unmarried. He was the dream man of many young girls. Hua Yunxi stood up and looked at Mo Xiuyao with a smile. "You've grown a lot taller after going out. I've long heard from grandfather that you won a battle. You're indeed worthy of being a descendant of Prince Ding's residence." Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and smiled, "It's just a small fight." Hua Yunxi smiled faintly and said, "Zhiyao, I haven't seen you in a long time. What have you been busy with recently?" Feng Zhiyao looked at Hua Yunxi and forced a smile, "It's nothing. I've been locked up at home by the old man." These years, young Master Feng San and the second young master of the Prince Ding mansion were in cahoots. No, one is influenced by their environment. At least half of the bad things that Mo Xiuyao did were done by young Master Feng San. Mo Xiuyao dealt with Prince Li and ran away. Feng Zhiyao was too young to run away. His father, old Master Feng, gave him a good beating and sent him home for confinement. Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows in confusion and asked, "What happened in the capital when I wasn't here?" After being brothers for a few years, Mo Xiuyao understood Feng Zhiyao well enough. If he had only been beaten up by his father and locked up, then Feng Zhiyao wouldn't have reacted this way. To put it bluntly, Feng Zhiyao was used to being taught a lesson by his father. Ever since young Master Feng San's martial prowess swept through the entire Feng clan, the only one left in the Feng clan who could teach him a lesson was his father. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.